When Lena Carter stumbled through the doors of Manhattan's most exclusive restaurant, barefoot, bleeding, and half dead, she had no idea the man who caught her would change everything. Adrian Viscari doesn't do mercy. He doesn't do second chances. But the moment her body collapsed into his arms, something shifted in the cold heart of New York's most feared crime boss. What started as a desperate escape became the most dangerous love story neither of them saw coming. Stay until the end to see how far survival can take you, and hit that like button and drop your city in the comments so I can see how far Lena's story reaches across the world. The rain hammered Fifth Avenue like it had a personal vendetta against the pavement. Lena Carter didn't feel it anymore. She'd stopped feeling most things 3 blocks ago when her bare feet went numb against the slick concrete. What she did feel was the hot sting of blood trickling down her temple, the brutal ache in her ribs where Marcus had landed that last kick, and the animal terror clawing up her throat every time she thought she heard footsteps behind her. She shouldn't have run. Running only made him angrier, but staying would have killed her. The streets blurred past in streaks of yellow cab lights and neon signs she couldn't read through the rain and the blood in her eyes. Her thin dress, the one Marcus had bought her, the one he said made her look presentable, clung to her body like a second skin, transparent and useless. She'd lost one of her heels 2 blocks back, left the other one embedded in Marcus's shoulder when she'd finally fought back. That's what started it, the fight back. 3 years she'd taken it, 3 years of walking on egg glass, of measuring every word, of making herself smaller and quieter and less until she was practically invisible. 3 years of telling herself it wasn't that bad, that he loved her really, that if she just tried harder to be what he needed. The crack of his fist across her face tonight had shattered that lie along with her cheekbone. Lena stumbled, caught herself against a parked Mercedes, left a smear of blood on the pristine silver paint. Her vision swam. She needed to stop, needed to hide, needed to... Luz Dorada. The name materialized through the rain-soaked haze, golden letters gleaming against dark wood. She'd passed this restaurant 100 times on her way to the coffee shop where she worked the early shift. Had never been inside. Would never be inside. Places like this didn't let in girls like her, girls with minimum wage jobs and bruises they covered with cheap makeup. But the door was right there. And Marcus's voice was getting closer. "Lena!" The roar cut through the rain, through the traffic, through every rational thought in her head. She shoved away from the Mercedes and ran. Her bare feet slapped against the sidewalk. Her lungs burned. The door to Luz Dorada gleamed like salvation 10 feet away, then 5, then... Her leg gave out. She hit the ground hard, tasted blood, felt something crack in her wrist as she tried to catch herself. The world tilted sideways. Rain filled her mouth. She couldn't get up. Couldn't breathe, couldn't... Hands grabbed her from behind. "You stupid bitch." Marcus's breath was hot against her ear, familiar and rancid. His fingers dug into her arms hard enough to bruise, new bruises on top of old ones. "Did you really think you could run from me?" Lena tried to scream. Nothing came out but a wet, broken sound. "I own you," Marcus hissed. "I bought you dinner. I gave you a place to live. You owe me." The restaurant door opened. Light spilled out onto the rain-slicked sidewalk, warm and golden and impossibly bright. Lena turned her head, squinting through blood and tears and rain, and saw him. She didn't know his name yet. Didn't know anything except that he was tall, maybe 6'3", and built like violence with a suit tailored to contain it. Dark hair swept back from a face that could have been carved from marble, if marble could look that dangerous. Eyes so dark they were almost black, fixed on her with an intensity that made her forget how to breathe. But it wasn't his face that made Marcus's grip loosen. It was the absolute silence that fell over the street when he stepped outside. Lena had lived in New York for 5 years. She knew what city noise sounded like. Taxis honking, people shouting, the constant urban symphony that never really stopped. But the moment this man appeared, everything went quiet. Even the rain seemed to fall softer. "Let her go." His voice was quiet. Calm, the kind of calm that came before hurricanes. Marcus laughed, actually laughed. "This is between me and my girlfriend, buddy. Walk away." The man's expression didn't change. He didn't blink, didn't raise his voice, just stood there in the rain in his probably $10,000 suit and repeated, "Let her go." Something in his tone made the hairs on Lena's arms stand up. made Marcus's fingers twitch against her skin. I said... 3 men materialized from the shadows behind the restaurant door. They didn't run, didn't pull weapons, just stood there, arranged in a semicircle behind the dark-eyed man. And that was somehow more terrifying than if they'd been pointing guns. Marcus saw them. Lena felt the moment his confidence cracked, felt his grip on her arms loosen just a fraction. You don't know who you're dealing with, Marcus tried, but his voice had gone thin. I'm a lawyer at Morrison and Blake. I have connections. You'll leave. The dark-eyed man took a step forward. Just one. Marcus jerked backward like he'd been shoved, dragging Lena with him. Or, the man continued in that same soft, terrible voice, I'll have my associates explain to you, in detail, why putting your hands on a woman in my neighborhood is a mistake you won't live long enough to regret. The world seemed to hold its breath. Then Marcus let go. Lena crumpled to the sidewalk, her legs refusing to hold her anymore. She heard Marcus stumble backward, heard him say something, some weak threat or curse or plea, but the words didn't register. All she could process was the absence of his hands on her body and the shocking, overwhelming relief of it. She tried to stand, made it to her knees before her vision grayed out at the edges. Easy. The dark-eyed man moved faster than someone his size should have been able to move. 1 second he was standing by the restaurant door, the next he was kneeling beside her on the rain-soaked pavement, his hand hovering near her shoulder, but not quite touching. Are you hurt? Lena tried to laugh. Tried to say something sarcastic about the blood running down her face and the way her ribs screamed every time she breathed. What came out was a broken sob. Okay. His voice shifted, went somehow gentler without losing any of that underlying steel. Okay. I'm going to pick you up now. Is that all right? Was it all right? When had anyone asked her if something was all right? She managed a nod. His arm slid under her knees, the other supporting her back. And then she was lifted like she weighed nothing. Like she was something precious instead of something broken. The world tilted again, but this time it felt less like falling and more like being caught. Marco, he spoke over her head to one of the men behind him. The lawyer. Make sure he understands the cost of coming back to this neighborhood. How permanent? Memorable. Not fatal. Yet. Lena felt herself being carried through the restaurant door, felt warmth replace the brutal cold of the rain, heard the murmur of voices go silent as they entered. She should have been embarrassed, barefoot and bleeding and dripping rainwater all over what was clearly a very expensive floor. Should have cared what all these well-dressed people thought of her. But his arms were solid around her, and for the first time in 3 years she felt safe. Her eyes drifted closed. Stay with me. His voice pulled her back from the edge of unconsciousness. What's your name? Lena. It came out as barely a whisper. Lena. He said it like he was testing the weight of it. I'm Adrian Vescari. You're safe now. She wanted to believe him, wanted to believe that safety was something that could be given with just words and strong arms and a voice that made the whole world go quiet. But she'd believed in safety before. Look where that got her. Lena woke up in a room that smelled like leather and expensive whiskey. Her first thought was that she'd died, that Marcus had killed her on that sidewalk, and this was some kind of liminal space between life and whatever came after. Because there was no way she was actually lying in a bed this soft, wrapped in sheets that probably cost more than her monthly rent, staring up at a ceiling that looked hand-painted with some kind of classical scene she didn't have the education to identify. Her second thought was pain. It hit all at once. Her ribs, her face, her wrist, her feet. Every part of her that Marcus had touched, and a few parts she didn't remember him touching. She tried to sit up and immediately regretted it, a sharp gasp escaping before she could bite it back. Don't move. Lena's head snapped toward the voice, which was a mistake because it made the room spin. When her vision cleared, she saw him sitting in a leather chair beside the bed, still wearing that suit, but with the jacket discarded and his sleeves rolled up to his elbows. Adrian Vescari, the man who'd pulled her off the street, the man who'd made Marcus run with just his voice. Where? Her throat was raw. Where am I? My apartment. You passed out before I could ask where you wanted to go. He stood, moved to a side table, and poured water from a crystal decanter into a glass, brought it to her without asking if she wanted it. The doctor said you have 2 cracked ribs, a mild concussion, and extensive bruising. Your wrist isn't broken, but it's badly sprained. He wrapped it while you were unconscious. Lena stared at him. Doctor? I have one on retainer. He said it like it was normal, like everyone had a private physician they could call it. She glanced at the window, saw darkness outside, whatever time it was. Drink. She took the glass with her good hand, brought it to her lips. The water was cold and perfect, and she drank half of it before she realized how thirsty she'd been. Adrian watched her with those dark, unreadable eyes. Didn't sit back down. Just stood there like he was ready to catch her if she fell, which was ridiculous because she was already lying down. The man who hurt you, he said quietly. Marcus? Is he your husband? No. The word came out sharp. Boyfriend. Ex-boyfriend. As of tonight. How long? 3 years. Something flickered across Adrian's face. Not pity, she couldn't have stood pity, but something harder, colder. And has he been hurting you for 3 years? Lena looked away, fixed her gaze on the water glass in her hand, on the way the light caught in the crystal and split into rainbows. It wasn't always bad. That's not what I asked. She set the glass down on the nightstand with more force than necessary. Why do you care? You don't know me. I'm nobody. You crashed through the doors of my restaurant covered in blood. His voice stayed level, controlled, but she heard steel underneath. That makes you my problem, and I don't leave my problems unsolved. I'm not a problem. I'm a person. I know. He pulled the chair closer to the bed, sat down again, and this time when he looked at her, there was something almost like respect in his eyes, which is why I'm asking instead of just handling it. Do you want Marcus dead? The question landed like a physical blow. Lena stared at him, searching for the joke, the exaggeration, any sign that he wasn't completely serious. Found nothing but that same calm, patient expression. You're insane, she whispered. I'm practical. He put you in the hospital. He'll do it again if given the chance. Adrian leaned forward, elbows on his knees, hands clasped. I can make sure he never gets that chance. But I need to know what you want. I want... Lena's breath hitched. What did she want? She'd spent 3 years not wanting anything, not thinking about anything except how to survive the next day. I want him to leave me alone. I want to stop being afraid. I want... Her voice broke. Adrian waited. Didn't rush her. Didn't offer empty platitudes or tell her it would be okay. Just sat there in expensive silence while she tried to pull herself back together. I don't want him dead, she finally managed. I just want to be free of him. Then that's what you'll have. He stood, buttoned his cuffs with precise, economical movements. Rest. There's a bathroom through that door with everything you might need. Clothes in the closet. They'll be too big, but they're clean. I'll have something brought that fits better tomorrow. Wait. Lena struggled to sit up despite the pain in her ribs. I can't stay here. I don't even know you. You could be... dangerous? A slight smile curved his mouth, but it didn't reach his eyes. I am dangerous, Lena. Extremely. But not to you. How can you possibly know that? How can I know that? Because if I wanted to hurt you, I wouldn't have pulled you off the street. I wouldn't have called my doctor. I wouldn't have asked what you wanted. He moved toward the door, paused with his hand on the frame. You're safe here. That's not a promise. It's a fact. Sleep. We'll talk more in the morning. Adrian? His name felt strange in her mouth, too intimate, but he turned back. Why are you helping me? He was quiet for a long moment, his expression unreadable in the dim light from the bedside lamp. Because everyone deserves one person who catches them when they fall, he finally said. Even if they don't believe they deserve it. Then he was gone, the door clicking shut behind him with a soft finality that somehow felt more secure than any lock. Lena sat alone in the too soft bed, in the too expensive room, wearing nothing but a t-shirt someone had changed her into while she was unconscious. She should have been terrified, should have been planning her escape, should have been doing anything except sinking back into the pillows and feeling, for the first time in 3 years, like maybe she could breathe. Outside, rain still hammered against the windows. Inside, wrapped in Egyptian cotton sheets that smelled like cedar and something darkly masculine, Lena Carter closed her eyes and slept without nightmares. Morning came with weak sunlight filtering through floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked Central Park. Lena woke slowly, her body one massive bruise, her mind fuzzy with painkillers she didn't remember taking. It took her several seconds to remember where she was, several more to convince herself it hadn't been a fever dream. Then she tried to sit up, and her ribs reminded her that everything, all of it, had been very, very real. Jesus, she hissed, pressing a hand to her side. Coffee or tea? Lena yelped, which hurt, and twisted toward the voice, which hurt worse. Adrian stood in the doorway holding a tray like he was some kind of deranged room service attendant. He'd changed clothes, different suit, this one charcoal gray with a black shirt underneath, no tie. His hair was still damp like he'd recently showered. You scared the hell out of me, Lena managed. Apologies, I knocked but you didn't answer. He crossed the room and set the tray on the bed beside her. I wasn't sure which you preferred, so I brought both, and food. The doctor said you needed to eat. Lena looked down at the tray. Coffee in a delicate porcelain cup, tea in another, toast, fruit, eggs that looked professionally prepared. Her stomach growled despite the pain. I can't pay you back for this, she said quietly. For the doctor, the clothes, everything. I work at a coffee shop. I make barely enough to cover rent and groceries. I can't. Did I ask you to pay me back? No, but then don't worry about it. Adrian pulled the chair over again, sat down in that same controlled way he did everything. Eat, then we'll talk. Lena wanted to argue, wanted to maintain some shred of pride, some sense that she wasn't just another charity case for a rich man to feel good about. But her stomach had other ideas, and the eggs smelled really good, and honestly, she was too tired to fight. She ate. Adrian watched her in silence, which should have been uncomfortable, but somehow wasn't. He had a stillness about him that was almost meditative, like he could sit there for hours without moving, and it wouldn't bother him at all. How do you feel? He asked when she'd finished most of the food. Like I got hit by a truck. Accurate. He didn't smile, but something softened around his eyes. The doctor will be back this evening to check on you. He'll bring stronger pain medication if you need it. I can't stay here. Lena set down the coffee cup, wrapped her good hand around it for warmth, even though the apartment was perfectly heated. This is too much. I need to go home, get my things, figure out where is home. She hesitated. Marcus's apartment. In Brooklyn. But I can't go back there. Obviously. Do you have family? Friends who could help? Lena laughed, a bitter sound that hurt her ribs. My family disowned me when I dropped out of college to move here with Marcus. Said I was throwing my life away. Guess they were right. And friends? She shook her head. He didn't like me having friends. Said they were a bad influence. I haven't talked to anyone outside of work in over a year. Adrian's expression didn't change, but his hands tightened almost imperceptibly where they rested on his knees. I see. So yeah, I'm kind of screwed. Lena tried for a smile, failed. But that's not your problem. I'll figure something out. There are shelters, and I can pick up extra shifts, and… No. She blinked. No? You're not going to a shelter. You're staying here until you're healed, and we've handled the Marcus situation. He said it like it was already decided, like her opinion was just a formality. After that, if you want to leave, I won't stop you. But right now you can barely stand up without passing out. So you're staying. You can't just… this is your home. You don't even know me. I know enough. Adrian started collecting the empty dishes from the tray. I know you had the courage to run when staying would have killed you. I know you fought back even though you knew it would make things worse. I know you'd rather go to a shelter than accept help from someone you don't trust. That's enough. Lena stared at him, at this strange, terrifying man who'd pulled her off the street and brought her to his home and was now clearing her breakfast dishes like it was normal. Who are you? She asked quietly. Really? Adrian paused, tray in hand, and looked at her. Really looked at her, like he was weighing how much truth she could handle. I'm someone who solves problems, he finally said. Usually permanent solutions to permanent problems. But I can be flexible when the situation calls for it. That's not an answer. It's the only answer you're getting right now. He moved toward the door. Rest. I have some business to attend to, but I'll be back this evening. If you need anything, press the button on the nightstand. Someone will come. Wait, who's someone? How many people live here? Just me. But I have staff. Of course he had staff. Lena waited until he'd left, until she heard his footsteps fade down what must have been a very long hallway, before she let herself really look at the room she was in. It was massive, bigger than the entire apartment she'd shared with Marcus. The bed alone could have fit 4 people comfortably. The furniture was all dark wood and leather, expensive but not ostentatious. Masculine. A door on the far wall was cracked open, revealing a bathroom that looked like it belonged in a 5-star hotel. She slid carefully out of bed, her body protesting every movement, and limped to the windows. Pressed her forehead against the cool glass and looked out at Central Park spread below like a green carpet. From this high up, the people looked like ants, the cars like toys. How far up was she? Lena turned, scanning the room for clues. Found them in the details she'd missed before. The security keypad beside the door, subtle but present. The lack of personal items. Nothing that would tell her who Adrian Viscari really was beyond wealthy and dangerous. The way the windows were probably bulletproof, though she couldn't be sure. Her gaze landed on a newspaper folded neatly on the dresser. She crossed to it, unfolded it with her good hand. The headline made her blood run cold. Attorney Marcus Blake found beaten in Midtown. Investigation ongoing. Lena's hands started shaking. She scanned the article, taking in phrases that made her stomach turn. Severe injuries. No suspects. Appeared to be a targeted attack. Currently in stable condition at Mount Sinai Hospital. The newspaper was dated today. Adrian had said he'd make sure Marcus understood the cost of coming back. He'd said memorable, not fatal. Lena sank down onto the edge of the bed, still holding the newspaper, her mind racing. She should have been horrified, should have been calling the police, getting as far from Adrian Viscari as possible. This was proof, actual evidence, that he was exactly as dangerous as he seemed, but all she felt was a savage, terrible relief. Marcus was in the hospital. Marcus couldn't come after her. Marcus had finally learned what it felt like to be helpless and hurt and afraid. And she was glad. The realization should have scared her more than it did. Lena was still sitting there, staring at the newspaper, when someone knocked on the door. She quickly folded it and set it aside, called out a shaky, "Come in." A woman entered, middle-aged, professionally dressed, with kind eyes and the no-nonsense air of someone who'd seen everything and wasn't impressed by any of it. "Miss Carter," she said warmly, "I'm Rosa. Mr. Viscari asked me to bring you some clothes and see if you needed anything." She held up several shopping bags from stores Lena recognized but had never set foot in. Bloomingdale's, Saks, Nordstrom. He shouldn't have, Lena started. He did anyway. Rosa set the bags on a nearby chair, started pulling out clothes, jeans, soft sweaters, undergarments that still had tags on them. "I guessed at your size, but everything's returnable if it doesn't fit. There are also some toiletries in the bathroom, and, oh, Mr. Viscari wanted me to give you this." She pulled out a cell phone. Brand new, still in the box. "Your boyfriend, ex-boyfriend, has your old phone," Rosa explained, her voice carefully neutral. "This one's yours, already activated. Mr. Viscari's number is programmed in. So is mine, in case you need anything, and he's not available." Lena took the phone with numb fingers. "This is too much." "Mr. Viscari doesn't do things by halves." Rosa smiled, but there was something almost sad in her expression. "If he's decided to help you, he's going to help you. Fighting it will only give you a headache." "How long have you worked for him?" 15 years, since his father died and he took over the... Rosa caught herself. "The family business." Lena looked up sharply. "What kind of family business?" Rosa's expression went carefully blank. "The kind that solves problems. Now, why don't you try on these clothes and then maybe take a bath? The doctor said the warm water would help with the bruising." She was being redirected. Lena recognized the technique. Marcus had been an expert at it. Change the subject, avoid the question, keep the uncomfortable truths buried. But Rosa wasn't Marcus. And there was something in her eyes, not pity, but understanding, that made Lena nod instead of pushing. "Thank you," she said quietly. For the clothes. For everything. Rosa's expression softened. You're welcome, honey. And Lena? Whatever you're thinking about Mr. Viscari, whatever you're afraid of, stop. He's a lot of things, but he doesn't hurt people who don't deserve it. And he sure as hell doesn't hurt women. Then she was gone, leaving Lena alone with a pile of expensive clothes, a new phone, and more questions than answers. Lena spent the rest of the day exploring the apartment, or at least the part she could reach without her ribs screaming in protest. It was enormous. 5 bedrooms, each with its own bathroom. A kitchen that looked like it belonged on a cooking show. A living room with furniture that probably cost more than her entire year's salary. Floor-to-ceiling windows in every room, all facing Central Park. But what struck her most was how empty it felt. Oh, it was furnished beautifully, clearly decorated by someone with money and taste. But there were no photos, no personal items, nothing that suggested someone actually lived here rather than just existing in it. She found Adrian in his office around 4 p.m., sitting behind a massive desk with a laptop open and papers spread around him. He looked up when she appeared in the doorway, leaning heavily on the frame because walking still hurt like hell. You should be resting, he said mildly. I've been resting all day. I'm going crazy. Lena hobbled into the room, lowered herself carefully into one of the leather chairs facing his desk. I need to ask you something. Adrian closed the laptop, giving her his full attention. Ask. Did you have Marcus beaten? He didn't even blink. Yes. The casual admission knocked the breath from her lungs. Just like that? You're not even going to deny it? Why would I deny it? I told you I'd make sure he understood the cost of coming back. I kept my word. Adrian leaned back in his chair, fingers steepled under his chin. Does it bother you? It should. Lena wrapped her good arm around her middle, pressing against the ache in her ribs. I should be horrified. I should be calling the police. But you're not. No. She met his dark gaze directly. I'm not. And I don't know what that makes me. Human. He said it simply, like it was obvious. He spent 3 years hurting you. You're allowed to feel relief that he's finally experiencing consequences. Is he going to die? Not unless he's incredibly unlucky. My associates were very precise in their work. Adrian's expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes. He'll heal, but he'll remember, and he won't come near you again. Lena absorbed this, turning it over in her mind. Part of her, the part that had been raised to believe in law and order and appropriate consequences, was screaming that this was wrong, that violence was never the answer, that she should be running from Adrian Viscari as fast as her broken body would carry her. But a larger part, the part that had spent 3 years being told she deserved every bruise, every cruel word, every moment of terror, felt something that might have been justice. Who are you really? She asked again. And don't give me that I solve problems line. I want the truth. Adrian studied her for a long moment, as if weighing her capacity for that truth. My family has controlled certain interests in New York for 3 generations, he finally said. Legitimate businesses, restaurants, real estate, shipping, and less legitimate ones. We provide services that exist in the gray areas of the law: protection, mediation, problem resolution. You're a criminal. I'm a businessman who operates outside conventional boundaries. He spread his hands. If that makes me a criminal in your eyes, I won't argue. But I'm also the reason you're not dead in an alley somewhere. So perhaps we can agree that morality is more complex than we're taught in school. Lena laughed, a short, sharp sound that hurt her ribs. You're insane. So you've said. The corner of his mouth quirked up. And yet you're still here. Where else would I go? You made sure of that when you had my boyfriend beaten half to death. Ex-boyfriend, Adrian corrected quietly. And I made sure of it when I gave you a safe place to heal. The Marcus situation is separate. He was right, and that somehow made it worse. Because Lena couldn't blame him for trapping her here when he'd literally just offered her clothes and medical care and asked nothing in return. Couldn't play the victim when he'd been nothing but honest about who and what he was. I don't understand you, she admitted. You're a crime boss. You hurt people for a living. But you pulled me off the street like I mattered. Why? Adrian was quiet for so long she thought he wasn't going to answer. When he finally spoke, his voice had gone soft in a way that made her chest tight. My mother was like you, he said. Beautiful. Fragile. Trapped in a relationship with a man who hurt her. My father. He looked past her, at something she couldn't see. I was 8 years old the first time I saw him hit her, too young to stop it, too weak to do anything but hide and pretend I didn't hear her crying. Lena's breath caught. When I was 15, I got strong enough to fight back. Put him in the hospital. Adrian's gaze refocused on her, sharp and hard. He never touched her again. But the damage was done. She died 2 years later. Officially, it was an aneurysm, but I've always believed it was from years of absorbing violence her body couldn't process. Adrian, so when I saw you fall on that sidewalk, bloody and broken and still trying to run, he stopped, jaw tight. I saw her, and I couldn't walk away. Won't walk away. Not from you. The confession hung in the air between them, raw and painful, and impossibly intimate for two people who'd met less than 24 hours ago. Lena didn't know what to say. Didn't have words for the complicated tangle of emotions in her chest, gratitude and fear, and something that might have been the first stirrings of trust. Thank you, she finally whispered, for telling me. For everything. Adrian nodded once, brisk and controlled again, the moment of vulnerability sealed away. The doctor will be here in an hour. After he checks you, we'll have dinner. You need to keep your strength up. Okay. Lena stood carefully, using the chair for support, paused in the doorway and looked back. Adrian? Your mother? What was her name? He met her eyes, and for just a second, the ice in them thawed. Elena, he said softly. Her name was Elena. Lena's own name, with one letter different. The coincidence felt like something more than chance, but she didn't push it, just nodded and left him there in his office, surrounded by papers and secrets and the ghosts of violence he'd inherited. That night, after the doctor had checked her ribs and pronounced her healing well, after a dinner of pasta and conversation that stayed carefully away from dangerous topics, Lena lay in the too-soft bed and stared at the ceiling. She thought about Marcus in his hospital bed, learning fear for the first time in his life. She thought about Adrian and his dead mother and the 8-year-old boy who'd been too weak to save her. She thought about herself, about Lena Carter, who'd spent 3 years disappearing, who'd crashed through restaurant doors covered in blood, who was now sleeping in a crime boss's guest room and feeling safer than she had in years. Somewhere between thinking and dreaming, she made a decision. She wasn't leaving, not yet. Not until she understood what it meant that Adrian Vescari had caught her when she fell, and why the darkness in his eyes didn't scare her nearly as much as it should. Outside, the city glittered like broken glass. Inside, Lena closed her eyes and let herself fall into sleep, knowing that for tonight at least, someone dangerous was keeping watch. And somehow, impossibly, that made all the difference. The bruises faded slower than Lena expected. 2 weeks in Adrian's apartment and the purple-black marks on her ribs had turned yellow-green. The split on her temple had scabbed over and fallen off, leaving pink new skin behind. Her wrist still ached when she moved it wrong, but the doctor said that would pass with time. What didn't fade was the strange domesticity that had settled over her life like dust. She woke up each morning to find breakfast waiting. Sometimes Rosa brought it, sometimes Adrian left it on a tray outside her door before he disappeared to wherever crime bosses went during business hours. She spent her days reading books from his extensive library, watching the park change colors outside the windows, trying not to think about the fact that she was living in a gilded cage and didn't particularly want to leave. The nights were harder. That's when Adrian came home, when the apartment shifted from empty museum to something that felt almost like a home. They'd started having dinner together, his insistence, not hers, though she'd stopped protesting after the third night. He was surprisingly easy to talk to once you got past the intimidating exterior and the casual references to criminal enterprise. They talked about books, about the city, about nothing and everything except the question that hung between them like a sword. What happened next? Lena was thinking about that question when Rosa found her in the library on a Thursday afternoon, curled up in a leather chair with a copy of something Russian and depressing. "You have a visitor," Rosa said, and something in her tone made Lena's stomach drop. "Marcus?" The name came out strangled. "No, honey, a woman. Says her name is Claire Patterson and she's your friend from college." Lena's hands went numb. The book slipped from her fingers and hit the floor with a thud she barely heard over the rushing in her ears. Claire. She hadn't spoken to Claire in over 2 years. Not since Marcus had convinced her that Claire was trying to sabotage their relationship, that real friends didn't ask so many questions about bruises and canceled plans. Not since Lena had blocked her number and ignored her emails and let one of the few good things in her life disappear because it was easier than fighting. "I don't," Lena started, then stopped. "Where is she?" "Downstairs in the lobby. Building security won't let her up without your permission." Rosa's expression was carefully neutral. "Do you want to see her?" "Did she?" Lena wasn't sure. Seeing Claire meant explanations, meant confronting the person she'd been 2 years ago, the girl who'd chosen a man over her friends and paid for it in bruises and isolation. Meant admitting how far she'd fallen and how she'd ended up here, in a crime boss's apartment, wearing clothes he'd bought and eating food he'd provided and feeling safer than she had in years. But it also meant connection, meant someone from her old life, from before Marcus, from when she'd still believed she could be something other than small and scared. "Yes," Lena said quietly. "Tell security to let her up." Rosa nodded and disappeared. Lena stood, caught sight of herself in the mirror over the fireplace. The bruises on her face were mostly gone, hidden under makeup Rosa had taught her to apply. She was wearing jeans and a soft blue sweater, both expensive, both gifts. She looked healthy, put together. Nothing like the broken thing that had crashed through the restaurant doors 2 weeks ago. Nothing like the girl Claire would remember. The doorbell rang. An actual doorbell, like this was a house instead of a fortress. Lena heard Rosa's footsteps in the hallway, heard the door open, heard a familiar voice say, "Holy shit, this place is insane." Then Claire was there in the library doorway, and Lena forgot how to breathe. She looked exactly the same. Wild red hair barely contained in a ponytail, freckles scattered across her nose, wearing ripped jeans and a leather jacket like she was still the art student who'd lived down the hall from Lena freshman year. Her eyes were the same too, sharp and assessing and impossible to lie to. Those eyes went wide when they landed on Lena. "Jesus Christ," Claire whispered. "It's really you." "Hi." It was all Lena could manage. Claire crossed the room in 3 strides and pulled Lena into a hug that made her ribs scream in protest. Lena bit back a gasp, hugged her back with her good arm, felt something crack open in her chest that had nothing to do with physical injury. "I thought you were dead," Claire said into her shoulder, voice breaking. "I tried calling, tried emailing. I even went to that coffee shop where you worked, but they said you quit and didn't leave a forwarding address. I thought Marcus had—" She stopped, pulled back, really looked at Lena for the first time, taking in the fading bruises, the careful way she held her left arm, the apartment around them that screamed money and danger. "What the hell happened?" Claire demanded. "And whose place is this? Because I know Marcus couldn't afford—" She gestured vaguely at the hand-painted ceiling, the first edition books, the view of Central Park. "This. It's a long story," Lena said. "Then start talking. Because I've been looking for you for 2 weeks, ever since I saw the news about Marcus getting beaten half to death, and thought maybe, just maybe, you'd finally gotten away from him." Lena sank back into the leather chair, suddenly exhausted. "How did you find me?" "Wasn't easy, but I know people who know people, and when you're looking for someone in New York, eventually you find breadcrumbs." Claire dropped into the chair across from her, leaning forward with that intense focus that used to make Lena feel seen in a way nothing else did. "There's a rumor going around that Adrian Viscari pulled a woman off the street outside Luz Dorada 2 weeks ago. That she was covered in blood and he carried her inside like she was something precious. The description matched you, so I took a chance. You know who Adrian is? Everyone knows who Adrian Viscari is, Lena. He's not exactly subtle about his business." Claire's expression went hard. "Please tell me you're not sleeping with him. Please tell me you didn't escape one abusive asshole just to fall into bed with a literal mobster." "It's not like that." The words came out sharper than Lena intended. "He saved my life. He's been nothing but what? Generous? Protective?" Claire laughed, but there was no humor in it. "That's how it always starts. Marcus was generous too at first, remember? Bought you flowers, took you to nice restaurants, made you feel special, and then he isolated you from everyone who gave a damn about you and spent 3 years beating you down until you couldn't remember who you were before him." Each word hit like a physical blow because they were true. All of it was true. "Adrian's not Marcus." Lena said quietly. How do you know? You've known him for what, 2 weeks? Because Marcus never asked what I wanted, never gave me a choice, never looked at me like I was a person instead of a possession. Lena met Claire's eyes directly. Adrian does? All of it. Claire studied her for a long moment, searching for something Lena wasn't sure she wanted found. You care about him, she finally said. Not a question. I don't know what I feel. Lena wrapped her good arm around her middle, pressing against ribs that didn't hurt quite as much anymore. I know I feel safe here. I know he's never touched me without permission. I know he had Marcus beaten because I told him I wanted to be free, and that should horrify me, but it doesn't. What does that make me? Human. Claire's expression softened. And probably traumatized. Lena, you need help. Real help. Therapy. Not... She gestured around the apartment. Whatever this is. I know. Lena had been thinking the same thing for days now. But I can't afford therapy. Can barely afford to breathe right now. I quit my job at the coffee shop when I left Marcus, and I don't have savings, and... Stay with me. Lena blinked. What? Stay with me, Claire repeated. I have a 2-bedroom in Brooklyn. My roommate just moved out, so the second room's empty. You can stay there while you get back on your feet. No strings. No crime bosses. Just you and me figuring out what happens next. The offer hung in the air between them, tempting and terrifying in equal measure. It was exactly what Lena should want. A way out. A return to normal life. A chance to rebuild without owing anything to a man who solved problems with violence. But the thought of leaving this apartment, of walking away from Adrian and Rosa and the strange safety she'd found here made her chest tight with something that felt uncomfortably like panic. I need to think about it, she heard herself say. Claire's face fell. Lena, I know how it sounds. I know what you're thinking, but I can't just walk away without... Without what? Without saying goodbye to the man who'd pulled her off the street? Without understanding why the thought of never seeing him again made her feel like she was drowning? I need time. Time to what? Fall deeper into whatever this is? Claire stood, started pacing. You're doing it again. You're letting a man make decisions for you. I'm making my own decision, Lena cut in, and the steel in her voice surprised them both. For the first time in 3 years, I'm choosing what I want instead of what someone else wants for me. And right now, I want time to figure out what the hell I'm doing before I make another life-changing decision. Claire stopped pacing, looked at her, really looked at her, and something shifted in her expression. Okay, she said quietly. Okay, but I'm not disappearing again. I'm going to check on you. I'm going to call and text and show up unannounced until you're sick of me. Because that's what friends do, Lena. They don't let go. Lena felt tears burn behind her eyes. I'm sorry. For everything. For cutting you out, for choosing him over you, for... Stop. Claire crossed back to her, knelt down beside the chair, and took Lena's good hand in both of hers. You were in an impossible situation. You did what you needed to survive. I'm not mad at you, I never was. I just want you to be okay. I don't know if I remember how to be okay. Then we'll figure it out together. Claire squeezed her hand. But promise me something. Promise me you'll be careful with Vescari. Men like him, they're dangerous in ways that have nothing to do with violence. They make you feel safe, feel protected, and then you wake up one day and realize you've traded one cage for another. I promise, Lena said, because it was what Claire needed to hear, but she wasn't sure it was a promise she could keep. After Claire left, with Lena's new phone number programmed into her contacts and a promise to meet for coffee in 2 days, Lena sat alone in the library and tried to untangle the mess in her head. She should leave. Should take Claire's offer and get out before whatever this was with Adrian became something she couldn't walk away from. Should rebuild her life the right way, the healthy way, without owing anything to anyone. But she couldn't make herself want to. The apartment door opened around 7, signaling Adrian's return. Lena heard his footsteps in the hallway, heard Rosa's greeting, heard the low murmur of their conversation. Then silence. She found him in his office, jacket discarded, sleeves rolled up, staring at his laptop with an expression that would have sent lesser men running. He looked up when she appeared in the doorway, and the hardness in his face softened almost imperceptibly. You had a visitor, he said. Not a question. How did you... Building security called. They always call when someone asks for access to this floor. Adrian leaned back in his chair, watching her with those dark, unreadable eyes. Your friend Claire Patterson, art gallery owner in Chelsea. No criminal record, no connection to Marcus. Clean. You ran a background check on her? I run background checks on everyone who comes near you. He said it matter-of-factly, like it was normal. It's safer that way. Lena should have been angry, should have resented the invasion of privacy, the assumption that he had the right to investigate her friends. But all she felt was a weary kind of resignation. She wants me to move in with her, Lena said. Says I should get away from you before I trade one cage for another. Something flickered across Adrian's face, too fast for her to identify. And what do you want? There it was again, that question, the one that gave her choice when everyone else just told her what to do. Lena crossed to his desk, lowered herself into the chair facing him. Her ribs barely protested anymore. I want to understand why I don't want to leave, she said honestly. I want to know why being here feels safer than going back to my old life. I want to figure out what the hell is happening between us, because it's not nothing, and we both know it. Adrian was very still. It's not nothing, he agreed quietly. Then what is it? He was silent for a long moment, his gaze holding hers with an intensity that made her skin warm. I don't know, he finally admitted. I've spent 15 years keeping people at a distance. It's safer that way, cleaner. But you, he stopped, jaw tight. You make me want things I shouldn't want. Like what? Like seeing you smile, like knowing you're safe, like keeping you close even though the smart thing would be to let you go. Adrian's hands curled into fists on the desk. I'm not a good man, Lena. I've done things that would make you run if you knew the details. I'll do worse things before I'm done. You should take your friend's offer. You should get as far from me as possible. But you don't want me to. No. The word came out rough. I don't. Lena's heart was beating too fast. This was dangerous territory. Emotions and want and the kind of honesty that led to complications neither of them needed. But she was tired of being careful, tired of making decisions based on fear instead of desire. I'm not leaving, she said. Not yet. Not until I'm ready. And when will you be ready? I don't know. Lena stood, moved toward the door, paused, and looked back. But I'll tell you when I figure it out. She left him there in his office, surrounded by whatever dark business occupied his nights, and went to bed feeling more awake than she had in years. The next 2 weeks passed in a strange rhythm. Lena had coffee with Claire every other day, long conversations about art and the city, and carefully avoiding the topic of Adrian except in the vaguest terms. She started physical therapy for her wrist, grueling sessions that left her sweating and swearing but gradually restored her range of motion. She read. She healed. She watched Adrian come and go with his dark suits and his darker secrets, and tried to ignore the way her pulse jumped every time he walked into a room. They had dinner together every night. Sometimes they talked. Sometimes they sat in comfortable silence, the kind that only existed between people who'd stopped trying to impress each other. He never pushed, never demanded, never made her feel like she owed him anything beyond her company. And that, more than anything else, was what made leaving impossible. It was a month after the night she'd crashed into his life when everything changed. Lena was in the kitchen attempting to make pasta, an olive branch, a way to contribute something beyond just existing in his space. She'd found Rosa's recipe book and was doing her best to follow instructions for carbonara when Adrian came home 3 hours early. She knew something was wrong the moment she heard his footsteps. They were too fast, too purposeful. When he appeared in the kitchen doorway, his expression made her blood run cold. Pack a bag, he said without preamble. We're leaving. Lena's hand stilled on the cutting board. What? Why? Marcus was released from the hospital this morning. Adrian's voice was controlled, but she could hear the tension underneath. He made bail 2 hours ago. And according to my sources, the first thing he did was ask about you. Fear spiked through her, sharp and familiar. He knows I'm here? Not yet, but he's looking, and he has resources. Lawyer friends, private investigators, people who owe him favors. Adrian moved into the kitchen, started gathering things with efficient, economical movements. I can protect you here, but it's safer if we're not predictable. I have a house upstate. Secure, private. We'll stay there until the Marcus situation is permanently resolved. Permanently resolved. Lena's voice came out flat. You mean until he's dead? Adrian looked at her directly. I mean until he's no longer a threat. The method is negotiable. This was it. This was the moment when the reality of Adrian's world crashed into the fantasy she'd been living, when she had to decide if she could accept what he was, not just in theory, but in practice. Not just violence in the abstract, but the specific, calculated elimination of a threat, of a person, even if that person was Marcus. I need you to understand something, Adrian continued when she didn't respond. His dark eyes were steady on hers, unflinching. I've killed people. Not many, but enough. Always for reasons I could justify. Self-defense, protection of family, elimination of threats that couldn't be contained any other way. I'm not proud of it, but I'm not ashamed either. It's the world I was born into. And you'd kill Marcus. Not a question. If that's what it takes to keep you safe, yes, without hesitation. He moved closer, close enough that she could smell cedar and something darker. But I won't do it without your consent. If you want me to find another way, legal channels, witness protection, disappearing you somewhere he'll never find you, I'll make it happen. The choice is yours. There it was again. Choice. The thing Marcus had never given her. Lena's hands were shaking. She set down the knife before she dropped it, gripped the edge of the counter for support. I don't want him dead, she heard herself say, but I don't want to spend the rest of my life running either. Then we find a middle ground. Adrian's voice gentled. We scare him badly enough that running sounds better than staying. We make it clear that pursuing you means consequences he's not willing to face. We convince him that you're not worth the cost. How? A ghost of a smile crossed Adrian's face. I have people who specialize in persuasion. And your friend Marcus, he's a coward underneath the lawyer veneer. Cowards break easily when they realize the rules don't protect them anymore. It should have sounded threatening, should have made her recoil, but all Lena felt was a savage satisfaction that Marcus was about to learn what fear really meant. Okay, she said quietly. Do what you need to do. Adrian nodded once. Pack enough for a week. Casual clothes. We leave in 20 minutes. He was gone before she could respond, leaving her alone in the kitchen with half-made carbonara and the knowledge that she'd just given a crime boss permission to terrorize her ex-boyfriend. The girl she'd been a month ago would have been horrified. The woman she was becoming just went to pack. The drive upstate took 2 hours. Adrian behind the wheel of a black SUV with tinted windows that probably cost more than Lena had made in her entire life. They didn't talk much. Lena watched the city give way to suburbs, give way to actual trees, her mind spinning with questions she didn't know how to ask. The house, when they finally reached it, wasn't what she expected. She'd been imagining something ostentatious, a mansion, maybe, or one of those modern glass structures that screamed money. Instead, Adrian pulled up to a sprawling craftsman-style home set back from a private road, surrounded by woods that looked like they went on forever. It was beautiful in an understated way, all natural wood and stone, with wide porches and windows that reflected the late afternoon sun. My grandfather built this place, Adrian said as he killed the engine. Back when the family business was mostly legitimate, my mother loved it here. Elena. The woman he'd named without quite naming her when he told Lena his story. It's beautiful, Lena said softly. It's safe. He grabbed their bags from the back. No one outside the family knows about this property. No public records, no paper trail. We could stay here for months and no one would find us. Months. The word sent a strange thrill through her that had nothing to do with fear. Inside, the house was warm and lived in a way Adrian's Manhattan apartment never felt. There were photos on the walls, actual personal items, family pictures spanning decades. Lena caught glimpses of a beautiful dark-haired woman who must have been Elena, a stern-looking man who had Adrian's jawline, a young boy with serious eyes who grew into the man standing beside her. Adrian gave her a quick tour, kitchen, living room, library that rivaled the one in Manhattan, 4 bedrooms upstairs. He put her bag in the room next to his without comment, just set it down and said, "Make yourself comfortable. I have some calls to make." Then he disappeared into what looked like an office, leaving Lena to explore on her own. She ended up on the back porch as the sun set, wrapped in a blanket she'd found draped over a chair, watching the woods turn dark. It was quiet here, in a way the city never was. No traffic, no sirens, Just wind in the trees and the distant call of something that might have been an owl. Can't sleep? Lena turned to find Adrian in the doorway, jacket gone, shirt unbuttoned at the collar. He looked different here, less like a crime boss and more like a man who'd escaped to the woods to find peace. Didn't try yet, she admitted. It's so quiet. I'm not used to quiet. He moved to stand beside her at the railing, careful not to crowd her space. It takes adjustment. I used to hate it when I was younger. Too much time to think. But now it's the only place I can actually relax. Do you come here often? Not as often as I should. Adrian was quiet for a moment, staring out at the darkening woods. The business keeps me in the city most of the time, but this is home in a way Manhattan never will be. Lena absorbed that, turning it over in her mind. Thank you for bringing me here, for keeping me safe, for everything. You don't need to thank me. Yes, I do. You didn't have to help me. You could have walked past me on that sidewalk, let Marcus drag me back to his apartment, let me become another statistic. But you didn't. You caught me when I fell, and you've been catching me ever since. Adrian turned to look at her, his expression unreadable in the fading light. You make it sound like charity. It's not. Then what is it? He was quiet for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. When he finally spoke, his voice was rough with something she couldn't identify. It's selfish. Having you here, it makes me feel like less of a monster. Like maybe there's still something good I can protect instead of just things I need to destroy. He laughed, a harsh sound. So don't thank me, Lena. I'm not doing this for you. I'm doing it for me. Lena's chest went tight. She turned to face him fully, saw the tension in his shoulders, the careful distance he maintained even now. What if it's both? She asked quietly. What if you're helping me and helping yourself, and that's okay? Nothing about this is okay. You should be with your friend Claire, rebuilding your life somewhere safe, not hiding in the woods with a man who's planning ways to terrorize your ex-boyfriend. But I'm here anyway. Lena took a step closer, closing some of that careful distance. I chose this. I keep choosing this. Doesn't that count for something? Adrian's jaw tightened. You don't know what you're choosing. Then tell me. Stop protecting me from the truth and just tell me who you really are. For a moment she thought he'd shut down, retreat behind that controlled exterior and change the subject like he always did when conversations got too personal. But something in her voice or her expression must have gotten through, because instead of pulling away, he started talking. My father was a monster, he said flatly. Ran the family business like a dictatorship. Anyone who crossed him disappeared. His own men feared him more than they respected him, which meant he couldn't trust anyone, including his wife, especially his wife. Lena stayed quiet, letting him work through it. When I took over after he died, I swore I'd be different. I'd earn loyalty instead of demanding it through fear. I'd build something sustainable instead of just taking what I wanted. And for the most part, I have. The violence is calculated now, strategic. We don't kill unless there's no other option. We protect our people. We have rules. But you're still a criminal. Yes. He didn't flinch from it. I still break laws. Still profit from things that exist in gray areas most people don't want to think about. Still use violence when necessary. I'm not a good man, Lena. I never will be. Good is relative. Lena surprised herself with the words. Marcus was a lawyer, worked within the system, followed the rules. And he spent 3 years beating me down until I couldn't remember what it felt like to exist without fear. You're a crime boss. You break rules for a living. And you've shown me more kindness in a month than he managed in 3 years. So forgive me if I don't put much stock in conventional definitions of good. Adrian stared at her like she'd said something profound instead of just honest. You're either very brave or very foolish. Maybe both. Lena moved closer still, close enough to feel the warmth radiating from his body. But I'm here, and I'm not leaving. So whatever happens next with Marcus, with us, with any of this, we figure it out together. Together. He repeated the word like he was testing the weight of it. Unless you want me to go. No. The word came out fierce. I don't want you to go. Then stop trying to scare me away. Lena reached up, touched his face, the first time she'd deliberately initiated contact. His skin was warm under her palm, his jaw rough with evening stubble. I know who you are, Adrian. I see you. And I'm still here. For a heartbeat, the world held its breath. Then Adrian's hand came up to cover hers, pressing her palm more firmly against his face. His eyes were dark and intense, and full of things she didn't have names for yet. "You're going to destroy me," he said quietly. "Aren't you?" Lena smiled, sad and hopeful and terrified. "Only if you destroy me first." "Never." The word was a vow. "I'd burn the world before I let anyone hurt you again, including myself." He meant it. She could see it in his eyes, feel it in the tension of his body, hear it in the absolute certainty of his voice. Adrian Vescari, who'd killed people and broken laws and built an empire on violence, would destroy himself before he let her come to harm. The realization should have been terrifying. Instead, it felt like coming home. They stood there on the porch as darkness fell completely, her hand against his face, his hand covering hers, the woods around them full of shadows and secrets. Tomorrow they'd deal with Marcus. Tomorrow they'd figure out what happened next. But tonight they just existed in this moment. Two broken people who'd found something unexpected in each other's ruins. And for the first time in longer than she could remember, Lena Carter felt like maybe, just maybe, she was exactly where she belonged. They stayed like that until the cold drove them inside, neither willing to be the first to break contact. When they finally moved, Adrian's hand slipped from hers with a reluctance that made her chest ache. He held the door open for her, and Lena brushed past him close enough to feel the heat of his body, close enough to catch the scent of cedar and something darker that was uniquely him. Inside, the house felt smaller, more intimate. Every sound seemed amplified. The creak of floorboards under their feet, the rustle of her clothing as she moved, the careful distance Adrian maintained even as his eyes tracked her every movement. "You should sleep," he said, voice rougher than usual. "Tomorrow's going to be difficult." "What happens tomorrow?" Adrian's expression went carefully neutral. "I have people meeting with Marcus, making him understand that pursuing you comes with consequences he's not equipped to handle. And if he doesn't listen, then the consequences escalate until he does." He said it matter-of-factly, like they were discussing weather patterns instead of calculated intimidation. "But he'll listen. Men like Marcus always do once they realize the rules don't protect them anymore." Lena should have pressed for details, should have demanded to know exactly what escalating consequences meant. But part of her didn't want to know, didn't want to reconcile the man who touched her face so gently with the one who could order violence with the same breath. "Okay," she said instead. "I trust you." Something flickered in Adrian's eyes, surprise, maybe, or something more complicated. "You shouldn't." "But I do anyway." Lena moved toward the stairs, paused with her hand on the banister. "Good night, Adrian." "Good night, Lena." She could feel his gaze on her back as she climbed the stairs, heavy and intent and full of things neither of them was ready to name. Her room was exactly as she remembered from the tour, comfortable and impersonal, decorated in earth tones that matched the woods outside. Someone had unpacked her bag while they'd been on the porch. Her clothes hung in the closet, her toiletries arranged in the bathroom. The efficiency should have been unsettling. Instead, it just felt like being taken care of. Lena changed into sleep clothes, soft pants and a t-shirt, and slid between sheets that smelled like lavender and something wilder. Through the wall, she could hear Adrian moving around in his room, water running, footsteps, the creak of bed springs as he lay down. She pressed her hand against the wall, feeling the solid reality of it, imagining him on the other side doing the same thing. Sleep came eventually, dragging her under into dreams that mixed Marcus's fists with Adrian's hands, fear with safety, running with staying still. She woke to sunlight streaming through unfamiliar windows and the smell of coffee drifting up from downstairs. For a disoriented moment, she couldn't remember where she was. Then it came back in a rush. The woods, the house, the conversation on the porch that had shifted something fundamental between them. Lena pulled on jeans and a sweater and headed downstairs, following the coffee smell like a lifeline. She found Adrian in the kitchen, dressed in dark jeans and a black Henley that made him look less like a crime boss and more like someone who belonged in these woods. He was pouring coffee into 2 mugs, moving with the kind of efficiency that suggested he'd been awake for hours. "Morning," he said without turning around. "How'd you sleep?" "Better than expected." Lena accepted the mug he offered, wrapping her hands around the warmth. You? About the same, but there were shadows under his eyes that suggested otherwise. I have to head into the city for a few hours. There's a meeting I can't miss. The Marcus thing? Related. Adrian took a sip of his coffee, watching her over the rim. I'll have someone stay with you while I'm gone, for safety. Lena's first instinct was to argue. She didn't need a babysitter, didn't need constant supervision. But the practical part of her brain, the part that had kept her alive through 3 years with Marcus, recognized that this wasn't about trust. It was about reality. Marcus was looking for her, and alone in the woods, she'd be vulnerable. Okay, she said. Who? Marco. You met him briefly that first night outside the restaurant. Adrian set down his mug. He's been with my family for 15 years. Loyal, discreet. He'll stay out of your way unless you need something. And if something happens? If Marcus somehow... Marco has instructions to get you somewhere safe and contact me immediately. Adrian's voice went hard. But nothing's going to happen. Marcus doesn't know about this place. Even if he did, he'd have to get past security, past Marco, past every failsafe I've built into this property. You're safe here. He said it with such absolute certainty that Lena almost believed him. Almost. Adrian left 20 minutes later in the same black SUV, leaving Lena alone with Marco, a solid, quiet man in his 40s who positioned himself in the living room with a laptop and a gun he didn't bother hiding. He nodded when she passed, acknowledged her with professional courtesy, then went back to whatever he was doing. Lena spent the morning exploring the house more thoroughly, found photo albums in the library, leather-bound and carefully preserved. Opened one to find pictures of Adrian as a child, serious-eyed and solemn even then, standing between his parents in formal portraits that looked more like obligations than memories. His mother Elena was stunning, dark-haired and delicate, with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. His father was imposing, radiating authority, and something colder that made Lena's skin prickle even in photographs. There were other photos too. Adrian as a teenager, already tall and serious. Adrian in his 20s, standing with men who had the same hard look in their eyes that Marco had. Adrian at what looked like his father's funeral, expression blank and controlled and completely unreadable. He was 17 when that was taken. Lena jumped, nearly dropping the album. Marco stood in the doorway, expression apologetic. Sorry, didn't mean to startle you. He gestured at the photo. His father's funeral. Adrian took over the business that day, youngest family head in 3 generations. That's young, Lena said quietly, to inherit that kind of responsibility. Too young. Marco's expression softened, but he grew into it, made it his own. His father ruled through fear. Adrian rules through loyalty. Different approaches, better results. Lena studied the photo again, looking at 17-year-old Adrian's blank expression and seeing something she recognized, the careful control of someone who couldn't afford to feel, who'd learned early that emotions were weaknesses to be managed. What was his mother like? She asked. Marco was quiet for a moment. Kind, gentle, completely wrong for the life she married into. He moved into the room, looked at the album over Lena's shoulder. She tried to protect Adrian from the worst of it, from his father's temper, from the violence, from the reality of what their family did. But you can't protect someone from their own inheritance. Did she know about what happened to her? You mean, did she know her husband was killing her one beating at a time? Marco's voice went flat. Yeah, she knew, but leaving wasn't an option. Not for women in her position, not in those days. So she endured until her body gave out. Lena closed the album carefully, feeling the weight of its contents like a physical thing. And Adrian? Adrian learned that the only way to protect the people you love is to be stronger than whatever wants to hurt them. Marco met her eyes directly. That's why he does what he does. Not for power, not for money, for control. Because control means no one else has to be helpless. The observation landed with uncomfortable accuracy. Lena thought about Adrian catching her on the sidewalk, about the way he'd asked permission before touching her, about how he'd given her choices when Marcus had taken them all away. Everything he did was about control, but not the kind Marcus had wielded. Adrian's control was protective, defensive, designed to create safety instead of fear, which made it more dangerous because it was so much harder to walk away from. He cares about you, Marco said quietly. I've worked for him for 15 years and I've never seen him bring anyone here, never seen him look at someone the way he looks at you. Whatever this is between you two, it's real. That's what scares me, Lena admitted. I don't know how to trust my own judgment anymore. I thought Marcus loved me too at first. Marcus is a coward who needed to feel powerful. Adrian is powerful but chooses mercy. Marco's expression was serious. They're not the same. Don't make the mistake of thinking they are. He left her there with the photo albums and her thoughts, returned to his post in the living room. Lena sat for a long time staring at pictures of Elena Viscari, seeing echoes of herself in that careful smile, in the way she held herself like she was trying to take up less space. But Elena hadn't made it out. Lena intended to. The question was whether she could do it while still staying close to the man who'd caught her when she fell. Adrian returned as sunset painted the woods in shades of orange and gold, looking tired in a way that went deeper than physical exhaustion. He dismissed Marco with a nod, waited until they were alone before sinking onto the couch beside Lena. How'd it go? She asked. Marcus received a visit from some associates. They explained the situation in terms he understood. Adrian's voice was flat, emotionless. He's been convinced to drop any charges related to the beating. He's also been convinced that pursuing you further would be inadvisable. Convinced how? Do you really want to know? Lena thought about it. About the violence implied in that casual word, convinced. About what Adrian's associates might have done to make a lawyer forget about revenge and self-preservation both. No, she said honestly. I just want to know if it's over. Not yet. Adrian scrubbed a hand over his face. He's scared, but fear fades. We need something more permanent. Something that makes staying away from you a matter of self-interest rather than just fear. What does that mean? Adrian turned to look at her, and something in his expression made her breath catch. It means I'm having people dig into his life. His cases, his finances, his connections. Men like Marcus don't get where they are without cutting corners. We find those corners, we own him. And once we own him, he stops being a threat. You're going to blackmail him. I'm going to ensure he has more to lose from coming after you than from leaving you alone. Adrian's gaze didn't waver. Is that a problem? It should have been. Should have been a line too far, a step too deep into Adrian's world. But Lena thought about Marcus's hands on her arms, thought about 3 years of fear and pain, and being made to feel like she deserved it. Thought about the freedom to exist without constantly looking over her shoulder. No, she said, it's not a problem. Relief flickered across Adrian's face, there and gone. My people are thorough. They'll find something. They always do. They sat in silence as the light outside faded to purple, then black. Adrian looked exhausted, shoulders tight with tension he couldn't quite hide. Without thinking about it, Lena reached over and took his hand. He went very still. Looked down at their linked fingers like he couldn't quite believe they were real. You don't have to do that, he said quietly. Do what? Comfort me. I'm the one who's supposed to be protecting you. Maybe we protect each other. Lena laced her fingers through his, feeling the calluses on his palm, the strength in his grip. Maybe that's how this works. Adrian's hand tightened around hers. I don't know how to do this, whatever this is. I'm good at business, good at strategy, good at violence. But this, he gestured vaguely between them with his free hand. I don't have a playbook for this. Neither do I. Lena shifted closer, drawn by something she didn't have words for yet. But we're figuring it out anyway. Are we? Aren't we? She turned to face him fully, their hands still linked between them. You brought me to your family home. You're dismantling my ex-boyfriend's life to keep me safe. You look at me like I'm something precious instead of something broken. That sounds like figuring it out to me. Adrian's free hand came up to cup her face, thumb brushing over her cheekbone with devastating gentleness. You're not broken, Lena. You're bent. There's a difference. What's the difference? Broken things can't be fixed. Bent things just need time to straighten out. His dark eyes held hers, intense and searching. And I have all the time in the world. Lena's breath caught. She was acutely aware of everything. The warmth of his hand against her face, the solid weight of his fingers laced through hers, the way he was looking at her like she was the only thing in the world that mattered. The space between them felt charged, dangerous, full of possibility. "Adrian," she whispered, not sure what she was asking, but he seemed to understand anyway. His thumb traced her lower lip, a question in the gesture. Lena answered by leaning in, closing the distance between them, pressing her mouth to his in a kiss that felt less like falling and more like flying. He went rigid for a heartbeat, like he couldn't quite believe this was happening. Then his hand slid into her hair, and he kissed her back with a hunger that stole her breath. It wasn't gentle. Nothing about Adrian was gentle except how he chose to touch her. But it wasn't violent either. It was intense and consuming and exactly what she needed. Lena's hands found his chest, felt his heart hammering under her palms. He pulled her closer, careful of her still healing ribs, and she went willingly, climbing into his lap and kissing him like he was oxygen and she'd been drowning. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Adrian rested his forehead against hers. "We shouldn't," he said, voice rough. "You're vulnerable. I'm taking advantage." "Shut up." Lena kissed him again, harder this time. "I'm choosing this. I'm choosing you. Stop trying to protect me from my own decisions." "Lena, do you want me?" She pulled back enough to meet his eyes. "Honestly, do you want this?" "Yes." The word came out fierce. "More than I should. More than is smart. More than—" She kissed him quiet, swallowing whatever self-recrimination he was about to offer. His arms came around her, solid and sure. And for the first time in longer than she could remember, Lena felt wanted for something other than what she could provide or endure. She felt wanted for herself. They moved upstairs eventually, a tangle of careful touches and heated kisses. Adrian kept asking if she was sure, if this was what she wanted, if she needed him to stop. Lena answered each time by pulling him closer, by showing him in actions what words couldn't quite capture. Later, lying in his bed with his arm around her and moonlight painting silver patterns on the ceiling, Lena felt something shift into place. Some puzzle piece she hadn't known was missing. "What are you thinking?" Adrian's voice was a rumble against her back. "That this is probably a terrible idea," she said honestly. "That I'm probably making another mistake. That getting involved with you is complicated and dangerous and exactly the kind of thing I should run from." His arm tightened around her. And I don't care." Lena laced her fingers through his where they rested against her stomach. "For 3 years, I made every decision out of fear. Fear of Marcus, fear of being alone, fear of what would happen if I tried to leave. I'm tired of being afraid. I'm tired of letting fear control me." "So what controls you now?" Lena turned in his arms to face him, saw him in the moonlight, all sharp edges and careful control and eyes that held depth she was only beginning to understand. "Choice," she said. "I'm choosing this, choosing you, choosing to see where this goes, even if it's messy and complicated and probably ends badly." It won't end badly. Adrian's hand traced patterns on her back, soothing and possessive at once. "I won't let it. You can't control everything. Watch me." But there was something almost like humor in his voice, a softness she was beginning to recognize as uniquely hers. Lena settled back against his chest, listening to his heartbeat, feeling safer than she had any right to feel given the circumstances. Outside, the woods were dark and full of things that hunted in the night. Inside, wrapped in the arms of a man who solved problems with violence and looked at her like she was salvation, Lena closed her eyes and let herself believe that maybe, just maybe, this could work. Morning came too soon, dragging Lena from sleep with Adrian's arms still around her and sunlight streaming through windows he'd forgotten to close. She started to shift, to slip out of bed without waking him, but his arm tightened. "Stay," he murmured, voice rough with sleep. So she did. They had coffee in bed like people who'd been doing this for years instead of hours. Adrian made calls from his laptop while Lena read. The domesticity of it so at odds with what he actually did for a living that it felt surreal. This was her life now, drinking expensive coffee and expensive sheets while a crime boss worked beside her, occasionally reaching over to touch her hand or her hair like he needed to confirm she was real. It was Marco who shattered the peace, appearing in the doorway looking grim. "We have a problem," he said without preamble. "Marcus hired a private investigator. Guy's good. Found 3 of our safe houses before we shut him down. He's getting close." Adrian was out of bed instantly, all business. "How close?" "Close enough that we need to move. Today." Marco's gaze flicked to Lena. He's got photos of her entering your Manhattan building, has your building staff on his payroll. It's only a matter of time before he puts together that you're here. Lena's blood ran cold. How? How did he find me? Money buys a lot of things, Marco said grimly, including loyalty from people who don't understand what they're dealing with. Adrian's expression had gone hard, dangerous in a way Lena had only glimpsed before. Get the car ready, full security detail. We're going back to Manhattan. That's the last place we should go, Lena protested. If he knows about your building, he knows about the building. He doesn't know about the penthouse security, or the private elevator, or the fact that I have 50 men who die before they let someone unauthorized get to you. Adrian was already pulling on clothes, moving with efficient precision. The city is my territory. Out here, we're exposed. There, I have control. Control. Always about control. Marco disappeared. Adrian finished dressing and turned to Lena, his expression softening fractionally when he saw her face. Hey. He crossed to her, cupped her face in his hands. Nothing's going to happen to you. I swear it. You can't promise that. Lena's voice came out smaller than she wanted. He's never going to stop. He's going to keep looking, keep digging, keep coming until I make him stop. Adrian's voice went cold. Permanently, if necessary. You said you wouldn't kill him. I said I wouldn't kill him without your consent. His thumb brushed over her cheekbone. But if he becomes a threat, I can't contain any other way. That consent becomes irrelevant. I won't let him hurt you. I won't let anyone hurt you, even if that makes me a monster. Lena stared at him, seeing the absolute conviction in his eyes, the willingness to cross any line if it meant keeping her safe. It should have terrified her. Instead, it made something fierce and possessive unfurl in her chest. I don't want you to be a monster for me, she said quietly. Too late. Adrian kissed her forehead, gentle despite the tension in his frame. I became a monster the day I decided you were mine to protect. Might as well lean into it. They packed quickly, Lena throwing clothes into her bag while Adrian made calls in terse, controlled tones. Marco had the SUV running when they came downstairs. Another man Lena didn't recognize in the passenger seat, gun visible in a shoulder holster. The drive back to the city felt different than the drive out. Faster, more urgent. Adrian sat beside her in the back, one hand on her knee, the other on his phone coordinating things she couldn't hear. Marco drove like he was being chased, though when Lena looked back, the road behind them was empty. They were an hour from Manhattan when Adrian's phone rang. He answered, listened, and his expression went absolutely still. When? Pause. Are you certain? Another pause, longer this time. Handle it. I'll be there in 40 minutes. He ended the call and turned to Lena. Whatever he saw in her face made him reach for her hand. Marcus showed up at your friend Claire's gallery, he said carefully. Demanding to know where you were. Threatened her. Lena's vision tunneled. Is she okay? She's fine. My people were already watching the gallery. I had them positioned there as a precaution. They intervened before Marcus could do more than yell. Adrian's grip on her hand tightened. But Lena, he's escalating. He's not thinking rationally anymore, which makes him more dangerous. I need to see her. I need to make sure. We will. As soon as we get to the city. Adrian pulled her closer, wrapped his arm around her shoulders. But after that, we end this. No more half measures. No more waiting for him to make the next move. We end it today. Lena looked up at him, saw the cold determination in his eyes, the promise of violence carefully contained. She should have argued, should have pushed for a peaceful solution, for law and order and appropriate channels. But Claire was her only real friend, and Marcus had threatened her. Okay, Lena heard herself say. End it. Adrian's expression shifted, surprise and something darker. Are you sure? Because once we cross this line, I'm sure, Lena's voice came out stronger than she felt. He spent 3 years hurting me. Now he's going after the people I care about. I'm done running. I'm done being afraid. I'm done letting him control my life, even from a distance. So whatever you need to do to make this stop, do it. For a long moment, Adrian just looked at her. Then he pulled out his phone and made a call. It's me, he said when someone answered. Activate the Blake contingency. Everything we have. I want him destroyed by sunset. He listened to whatever response he got, then added in a voice that made Lena's spine stiffen, "And make sure he knows exactly why this is happening. Make sure he knows that touching what's mine comes with a price he can't afford to pay." He ended the call and met Lena's eyes. "It's done," he said quietly. "By tomorrow morning, Marcus Blake won't have a career, won't have assets, won't have anything except the understanding that he got off easy, that I showed mercy by not killing him, and that if he ever comes near you again, that mercy evaporates." Lena nodded, unable to speak past the tightness in her throat. This was it. The moment when she stopped being a victim and started being something else, something harder, something that chose violence over fear because fear had never kept her safe anyway. The city rose up around them, steel and glass and millions of lives intersecting in complicated patterns. Somewhere in all that chaos, Marcus Blake was about to learn what it meant to go to war with Adrian Viscari. And Lena, who'd once been too afraid to even think about fighting back, sat in the back of an SUV holding a crime boss's hand and felt nothing but savage satisfaction. They went straight to Claire's gallery, Adrian flanking Lena like a bodyguard while Marco and two other men she didn't know formed a perimeter. Claire was in her office, looking shaken but defiant, and when she saw Lena, she burst into tears. "I'm so sorry," Claire said, clutching Lena's hands. "He was ranting about how you belonged to him, how you'd stolen from him, completely delusional stuff. She glanced at Adrian. "Your people got him out before he could break anything. But Lena, he's not stable. He's dangerous." "Not anymore," Adrian said quietly. "I'm handling it." Claire's eyes widened. She looked between Adrian and Lena, seemed to see something in their linked hands that made her expression shift. "Okay," she said slowly. "I'm not going to ask questions I don't want answers to. But Lena, are you safe? Really safe?" "Yes." Lena squeezed her friend's hands. "I promise, this ends today." "And you trust him?" Claire jerked her chin at Adrian. Lena turned to look at him, at this man who'd caught her when she fell, who'd brought her into his home and his life, who was currently in the process of destroying her ex-boyfriend's entire existence because Marcus had dared to threaten someone Lena cared about. "Yes," she said. "I trust him." Claire studied them both for a long moment, then sighed. "Okay, but I'm holding you to that. And if anything happens, it won't." Adrian's voice was absolute. "You have my word." They left Claire with promises to call, to check in, to have coffee soon. Back in the SUV, Adrian pulled Lena against his side and made more calls while Marco navigated through traffic. By the time they reached his building, it was early evening and Adrian's phone had stopped ringing. "It's done," he said as they rode the private elevator to his penthouse. "Marcus Blake has been disbarred pending investigation into ethics violations. His bank accounts have been frozen by the IRS for tax fraud. His apartment lease was terminated for non-payment. Turns out his landlord found a better offer. And every major law firm in the city has been quietly informed that hiring him would be inadvisable." Lena absorbed this, trying to process the sheer scope of what he'd done. "You destroyed his entire life in 6 hours. I removed the tools he used to hurt people, including you." Adrian's expression was unreadable. "He can rebuild if he wants, but it'll be somewhere else, doing something else, far away from you. And if he's smart, he'll take the lesson and disappear. And if he's not smart?" Adrian's hand found the small of her back as the elevator doors opened. "Then the consequences escalate. But I don't think it'll come to that. Men like Marcus fold when they lose everything. They're only strong when they have power. Take away the power, and they're nothing." They entered the penthouse to find Rosa waiting, looking relieved when she saw Lena. "Thank goodness," she said, pulling Lena into a quick hug. "When Mr. Viscari said there was trouble, I worried." "I'm fine," Lena assured her. "Everyone's fine." Rosa nodded, then tactfully disappeared, leaving them alone in the vast living room with its view of the park and the city beyond. Adrian moved to the windows, staring out at the lights beginning to appear in the gathering dark. "Are you okay?" Lena asked quietly. He turned to look at her, and for the first time since this whole thing started, he looked tired. "I should be asking you that." "I asked first." Adrian smiled, a brief flash that softened his whole face. "I'm fine. Just thinking about what comes next." "What does come next?" He crossed to her, took both her hands in his. That depends on what you want. You're safe now. Marcus is handled. You can go back to your life, move in with Claire, rebuild without any of my darkness touching you. Or? Her heart was beating too fast. Or you stay. His dark eyes held hers. You stay here, with me, and we figure out what this is between us. We take it slow or fast or however you want, but you stay. Lena looked around the penthouse, at the space she'd occupied for weeks now, at the life she'd accidentally fallen into, at the man who'd caught her and kept catching her every time she threatened to fall. She thought about Claire's gallery and normal life and starting over the right way, thought about therapy and healing and all the things she probably needed to be healthy. Then she thought about Adrian's hands on her face, about the way he looked at her like she was something precious, about how for the first time in years she felt like she existed instead of just surviving. I'll stay, she said. On one condition. Adrian's expression went wary. What condition? You stop trying to protect me from yourself. Lena stepped closer, close enough to rest her hands on his chest. You stop acting like you're some monster I need to be saved from. You let me make my own choices about what I can handle. Deal? For a long moment, he just looked at her. Then he pulled her close and kissed her, deep and thorough and full of promises neither of them had words for yet. Deal, he murmured against her mouth. But if you change your mind, I won't. You might. Then I'll tell you. Lena pulled back enough to meet his eyes. I'm not Marcus's victim anymore, Adrian, and I'm not yours to protect from everything, including yourself. I'm just me? Bent, but not broken. Healing, but not healed. Choosing you anyway. Something in his expression cracked, revealing vulnerability he usually kept locked away. I don't deserve you. Probably not, Lena smiled. But you caught me when I fell, so you're stuck with me now. Adrian laughed, actually laughed, and pulled her close again. Outside, the city glittered with a million lives in motion. Inside, two people who'd found each other in violence and fear and unexpected grace stood holding each other, figuring out what came next. It wouldn't be easy. Lena knew that. She'd need therapy. Would need to learn how to trust her own judgment again. Would need to navigate what it meant to be with someone whose business was violence even when his hands were gentle. But she'd survived Marcus. She'd survived the worst thing she could imagine. Everything after this was just figuring out how to live instead of just survive. And looking up at Adrian's face, seeing the way he looked at her like she was his whole world, Lena thought maybe that was possible after all. 3 days passed in a strange, suspended reality where Lena kept waiting for the other shoe to drop, and it never did. Marcus didn't call, didn't show up, didn't send threatening messages or hire more investigators. According to Adrian's people, he'd packed what belongings he could carry and left the city entirely, heading west with no forwarding address and no plans to return. He's gone, Adrian told her over breakfast on the fourth morning, setting down his phone with an air of finality. My sources confirmed he's in Nevada, working as a paralegal for a small firm in Reno, living in a studio apartment, keeps his head down. Lena absorbed this, trying to reconcile the man who'd terrorized her for 3 years with someone who'd folded so completely. Just like that? He just gave up? He learned the cost of not giving up. Adrian's voice was matter of fact. Sometimes the lesson sticks. She wanted to feel relief. Wanted to feel the weight lift off her shoulders and finally breathe without the constant fear that Marcus would appear around every corner. But all she felt was a strange emptiness, like she'd been bracing against a door that had suddenly disappeared. You okay? Adrian reached across the table, covered her hand with his. I don't know. Lena stared at their joined hands. I spent so long being afraid of him, and now he's just gone, and I don't know what to do with myself. You live. Adrian's thumb traced circles on her palm. You figure out who you are when you're not running or hiding. You build something new. Is that what you did after your father died? He was quiet for a moment, considering. I rebuilt what he'd broken. Different approach, same foundation. But you're starting from scratch. That's harder and easier. Depends on the day. Lena looked up at him, saw something vulnerable in his expression that he usually kept hidden. Teach me. Teach you what? How to rebuild. How to be strong. How to... She gestured vaguely, frustrated by her inability to articulate what she meant. How to be someone who doesn't flinch when doors slam. Someone who can walk down the street without checking over her shoulder. Someone who exists instead of just surviving. Adrian stood, moved around the table, and pulled her up into his arms. You're already that person, Lena. You just haven't realized it yet. I don't feel like that person. You crashed through restaurant doors covered in blood rather than stay with a man who was killing you. You trusted a stranger when every instinct probably told you to run. You stood up to me when I tried to make decisions for you. You chose to stay even knowing what I am. His hands framed her face, tilting it up to meet his eyes. You're stronger than you think. You just need time to remember. She wanted to believe him, wanted to feel the strength he seemed to see in her. But standing there in his kitchen, wearing his t-shirt and trying not to cry, she mostly just felt tired. What if I can't? She whispered. What if I'm too broken? Then I'll hold the pieces until you're ready to put them back together. Adrian kissed her forehead, however long it takes. It was the therapist's idea to start small. Doctor. Sarah Chen, 40-something, sharp-eyed, with an office in the Upper East Side that felt more like a living room than a clinical space, had listened to Lena's story with professional compassion and then prescribed homework. I want you to do one thing each day that scares you, Dr. Chen said during their second session. Not big things, not dramatic gestures, small acts of reclamation. Take a different route to the coffee shop. Wear red lipstick if you never did before. Say no to something you'd normally agree to out of habit. That's it? Lena had expected something more profound, more therapeutic. That's it? Dr. Chen smiled. Trauma lives in the body, in the patterns we develop to protect ourselves. We break those patterns one small choice at a time. So Lena started small. She went to the coffee shop alone, the first time she'd been out without Adrian or Marco or someone watching her back in weeks. She ordered something different than her usual. She sat at a table instead of hiding in the corner. She made eye contact with strangers and didn't immediately look away. Each small thing felt monumental. Each tiny act of normalcy required courage she hadn't known she possessed, but she did it anyway. Adrian watched this transformation with something that looked like pride mixed with concern. He gave her space when she needed it, but never went far, always just a phone call away if the panic got too bad. He didn't hover, seemed to instinctively understand that she needed to do this herself, but he made sure she knew he was there. How was therapy? He'd ask each time she came home, and she'd tell him about the homework assignments, about the breathing exercises, about the way Dr. Chen was helping her untangle 3 years of learned helplessness and rebuild her sense of self. He listened to all of it with an attention that made her feel seen in ways she'd forgotten were possible. 2 weeks after Marcus left the city, Claire invited them both to dinner at her apartment. Lena almost said no. The thought of navigating the social complexity of her best friend and her crime boss boyfriend in the same room made her want to hide. But that was exactly the kind of fear Dr. Chen wanted her to push through. So she said yes. Claire's apartment was small but warm, decorated with art she'd collected over years of gallery work. She greeted them at the door with wine and a slightly manic smile that suggested she was as nervous about this as Lena was. Adrian, she said, overly formal. Thanks for coming. Thank you for having me. He handed her a bottle of wine that probably cost more than her rent, effortlessly polite in a way that suggested he'd done this before. They made it through appetizers with stilted small talk about the gallery and the weather and carefully neutral topics. Then Claire poured them all more wine and fixed Adrian with a direct stare. So let's just address the elephant in the room, she said. You're a crime boss. Lena's my best friend who just escaped an abusive relationship. And you two are... what? Exactly? Claire, Lena started. No, it's fine. Adrian set down his wine glass, met Claire's gaze directly. You're right to be concerned. You care about Lena. You want to make sure she's not trading one bad situation for another. I respect that. So answer the question, what are you two? Adrian glanced at Lena, something soft in his expression. We're figuring it out, taking it slow. She's living with me but has her own space. She's in therapy working through what she needs to work through. I'm trying not to be... He paused, searching for words, trying not to be too much too fast. And the crime boss thing? Claire pressed. That doesn't bother you, Lena? Lena took a breath, felt Adrian's eyes on her, felt the weight of the question and the honesty it deserved. It should, she admitted. I should be horrified by what he does, by the violence and the gray areas and all of it. But Claire, he's never once made me feel unsafe, never raised his voice to me, never touched me without permission, never made me feel small or stupid or like I deserved to hurt. Marcus was a lawyer, worked within the system, and he spent 3 years destroying me. So forgive me if I'm not sure conventional morality is the metric I want to use anymore. Claire was quiet for a long moment, studying them both. You love him? It wasn't a question, but Lena answered anyway. I'm starting to, yeah. And you? Claire turned to Adrian. How do you feel about her? Adrian's hand found Lena's under the table, laced their fingers together. I'd burn the world for her, he said simply. And I'm trying very hard not to, because that's not what she needs. But the impulse is there. That's terrifying, Claire said. I know. Adrian's grip on Lena's hand tightened, but I'm working on it. The dinner got easier after that, the honesty clearing the air enough for actual conversation. They talked about Claire's gallery opening next month, about art and the city, and books they'd all read. Adrian was surprisingly well-versed in contemporary art, engaging Claire in a debate about installation pieces that made Lena smile. He fit, she realized, in her life, in her world, in the spaces she was rebuilding. He fit in ways Marcus never had. When they left, Claire hugged Lena tight and whispered, I still think you're crazy. But if you're happy, I'm happy. I'm getting there, Lena whispered back, one day at a time. In the car on the way home, Adrian was quiet. Lena watched the city lights streak past the windows and felt him working through something. Thank you, he finally said, for defending me. To Claire. I wasn't defending you, I was telling the truth. It's the same thing. He reached over, took her hand again. I know this isn't easy, being with me, the complications, the questions, the way people look at you when they figure out what I am. People used to look at me and see Marcus's girlfriend, Lena said, the quiet one who never spoke up, the one with bruises she explained away. Now they look at me and see Adrian Viscari's. She paused, realized she didn't actually know what to call herself. Partner, Adrian supplied quietly, if that's what you want. Partner. Lena tested the word, felt it settle into place. Yeah, I like that. They spent the rest of the drive in comfortable silence, hands linked, the city passing by outside. When they got home, and it was home now, Lena realized, not just his apartment but theirs, Rosa had left dinner warming in the oven and a note about needing to visit her sister for a few days. They ate on the couch, feet tangled together, watching some documentary about art theft that Adrian seemed genuinely interested in. Normal things. Domestic things. The kind of evening Lena had once dreamed about and stopped believing was possible. I have to go to Chicago next week, Adrian said during a lull. Business thing. 3 days, maybe 4. Lena's stomach dropped. The thought of being here without him, even with Marco and Rosa and all the security money could buy, made her chest tight. Adrian must have seen it in her face because he pulled her closer. Come with me. To Chicago? For business? Why not? You can explore the city while I'm in meetings. We can have dinners somewhere that's not here. Get away for a few days. He paused. Unless you'd rather stay. I know Dr. Chen wants you building independence. Lena thought about it. About staying here alone as proof she could. About going with him as proof she wanted to. About what Dr. Chen had said about small choices building toward bigger ones. I'll come, she said. But I want to do things alone while you're in meetings. Actually alone, not with Marco following me. Adrian's jaw tightened. Lena. I need to prove I can. She turned to face him fully. I need to know I can walk around a strange city by myself without falling apart. That I can exist independently even when I'm choosing to be with you. Okay? He studied her for a long moment, conflict clear in his expression. Finally, he nodded. Okay. But you keep your phone on. You check in every few hours. And if anything feels wrong, I'll call you immediately. Lena kissed him, soft and quick. I promise. You're going to give me a heart attack, he muttered, but pulled her back in for a longer kiss that made her forget why they were talking about Chicago in the first place. Chicago was cold and windy and beautiful in ways New York wasn't. Adrian set them up in a suite at the Park Hyatt with views of the lake and the city, all glass and steel and luxury. Their first morning, he left for meetings with a kiss and a reminder to call if she needed anything, and Lena stood at the window watching the city wake up and trying not to panic. She could do this. She'd walked Manhattan alone, had gone to therapy alone, had started rebuilding her life in small, careful pieces. A day in Chicago was just another piece. The museum was her first stop, the Art Institute, massive and overwhelming in the best way. Lena lost herself in galleries full of impressionists and modern installations, in the quiet contemplation of beauty that had nothing to do with fear or survival. She had lunch alone at a cafe, made small talk with the waitress, paid with Adrian's credit card, and felt only slightly guilty about it. He'd insisted, said she should enjoy herself, said he wanted her to have things that made her happy. She was learning to let him do that without feeling like she owed him something in return. The panic attack hit on day 2 in the middle of Millennium Park with tourists everywhere and the bean reflecting distorted versions of reality. 1 minute Lena was fine, admiring the sculpture and feeling proud of herself for doing this alone. The next, her chest was tight and she couldn't breathe and the crowd pressed in too close, and she was certain Marcus was there, somewhere in the mass of people, waiting to drag her back. She found a bench, sat down hard, put her head between her knees, and tried to remember the breathing exercises Dr. Chen had taught her. 4 counts in. Hold for 4, 4 counts out, repeat. Her phone rang. Adrian's name on the screen. "Hey," she managed, voice shaking. "Where are you?" No preamble, just immediate concern. "Millennium Park. I'm fine, just needed to sit down." "Panic attack?" "Yeah. No point lying. But I'm handling it, breathing through it." She heard movement on his end, voices in the background being dismissed. "I'm 10 minutes away. Stay there." "Adrian, you have meetings. They can wait. Stay there." He hung up before she could argue. Lena sat on the bench, breathing carefully, watching tourists take selfies with the bean and feeling the panic slowly recede. By the time Adrian appeared, moving through the crowd with Marco a step behind, she was mostly calm again. He sat down beside her without a word, took her hand, just existed there as an anchor while she finished pulling herself together. "Sorry," she finally said. "I know you're busy." "Stop apologizing." Adrian's thumb traced patterns on her palm. "You had a panic attack. That's not something to apologize for." "I was doing so well." "You are doing well. One bad moment doesn't erase all the progress." He turned to look at her, eyes serious. "This is part of healing, Lena. 2 steps forward, 1 step back. Dr. Chen told you that." "I know, I hate feeling weak." "You walked around Chicago alone for a day and a half before this happened. That's not weak, that's brave as hell." Adrian pulled her closer, let her lean against his shoulder. "Take the win. The panic attack is just your brain processing trauma. It doesn't mean you failed." Lena closed her eyes, breathed in his scent, cedar and something darker that meant safety. "Thank you for coming." "Always." He kissed the top of her head. "Ready to head back to the hotel?" "Actually," Lena pulled back, looked at him. "Can we walk for a bit? I don't want to let the panic win. I want to take back the park." Pride flickered across Adrian's face. "Yeah, we can walk." They spent the afternoon wandering Chicago hand in hand, Adrian pointing out buildings with interesting architecture, Lena slowly feeling her equilibrium return. Marco followed at a discreet distance, professional enough to be invisible when they needed privacy. That night, back in their suite with room service and the city lights spread out below them, Adrian pulled her close on the couch. "I'm proud of you," he said quietly, "for pushing through, for not letting the fear win." "I had help." Lena laced her fingers through his. "I couldn't do this without you." "You could. You're stronger than you think." He paused, something shifting in his expression. "But I'm glad you don't have to. Do it alone, I mean." "Me too." Lena turned to face him fully, saw vulnerability in his eyes that he didn't usually let show. "What is it? What's wrong?" "Nothing's wrong, I just—" Adrian stopped, seemed to be choosing his words carefully. When you called during the panic attack, my first thought wasn't about the meetings I was in or the deals I was making. It was just getting to you, making sure you were okay. And I realized that somewhere along the way, you became the most important thing in my life. Lena's breath caught. Adrian, I'm not asking for anything, he continued quickly. I know you're still healing. I know this is complicated. I just needed you to know that you matter, more than business, more than reputation, more than any of it. You matter most. She kissed him instead of answering, poured everything she couldn't quite say into the press of her mouth against his. He responded with a hunger tempered by gentleness, pulling her closer until there was no space between them. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Lena rested her forehead against his. You matter most to me too, she whispered. I know I'm supposed to focus on healing, on building independence, on all the healthy things Dr. Chen talks about. But Adrian, you're part of that healing. You're part of what makes me want to get better. And I don't care if that's codependent or unhealthy or whatever. It's true. We'll figure it out, Adrian said. The healthy balance. The independence without loneliness. All of it. Together. Together, Lena agreed and kissed him again. They made love that night with a tenderness that felt different than before, less desperate and more certain. Afterward, wrapped in hotel sheets with Adrian's arm around her and the city glowing outside, Lena felt something shift into place. Some final piece of acceptance that this was her life now. This man, this strange relationship, this complicated love that had grown from violence and fear into something real. She'd stopped running, stopped hiding, stopped being the girl who'd crashed through restaurant doors covered in blood. She was someone new now, someone stronger, someone who'd chosen to heal and fight and love even when it was terrifying. And lying there in Adrian's arms, listening to his heartbeat slow into sleep, Lena finally believed she deserved it. They flew back to New York 2 days later. Lena actually relaxed in a way she hadn't been since this whole thing started. The penthouse welcomed them back with Rose's cooking and fresh flowers and the familiar comfort of home. Life settled into a rhythm after that. Therapy twice a week, coffee with Claire, small outings alone that gradually became bigger as her confidence grew. Adrian's business continued, meetings and deals and the careful violence he wielded to maintain control, but he kept it separate from her, gave her the option to know or not know, depending on what she could handle. She chose not to know most of the time, chose to focus on this man who came home to her each night, who looked at her like she was his whole world, who made her laugh and held her when nightmares came and never once made her feel small. It was a month after Chicago when the letter came. Rosa brought it up with the morning mail, an envelope addressed to Lena in handwriting she didn't recognize. No return address. Postmarked from Nevada. Her hand shook as she opened it. The letter inside was short, written in Marcus's precise script. Lena, I'm not asking for forgiveness. I know I don't deserve it. I'm writing because my therapist says I need to take accountability for what I did. So here it is. I hurt you. Repeatedly. Intentionally. I used your love as a weapon and your fear as control. I told myself I loved you while treating you like property. I was wrong. I am sorry. I'm getting help now. Real help. And I want you to know that you were right to run, right to fight back, right to find someone who treats you better than I ever did. I hope you're happy. I hope you're healing. I hope you never think about me again. You deserve better than the man I was. You always did. Marcus. Lena read it 3 times, feeling nothing and everything at once. Anger that he thought a letter could undo 3 years of damage. Relief that he was getting help. Sadness for the girl she'd been who'd loved him before he showed her who he really was. But mostly, she felt free. Adrian found her on the balcony an hour later, still holding the letter, staring out at the park. Everything okay? He touched her shoulder gently, giving her space to pull away if she needed it. Lena handed him the letter without a word, watched his face as he read it, saw his jaw tighten but his expression stay controlled. How do you feel? He asked when he finished. I don't know. Lena took the letter back, folded it carefully. He's trying. That's something, more than I expected. It doesn't erase what he did. I know, but it's acknowledgement. That's more than most abusers ever give. She looked up at Adrian. Dr. Chen says part of healing is accepting that people are complicated, that Marcus can be both the monster who hurt me and the broken person trying to be better. Both things can be true. And you're okay with that? Lena thought about it, really thought about it. Yeah, I think I am, because his journey isn't mine anymore. He can get better or not. He can heal or not. It doesn't affect me. I'm building something new that has nothing to do with him. Adrian pulled her close, pressed a kiss to her temple. I'm proud of you. For what? For being able to separate his accountability from your healing, for not needing him to suffer in order to move on. That takes strength most people don't have. Lena leaned into him, felt his solid warmth against her back. I learned from the best. You learned from yourself. Adrian's arms tightened around her. I just gave you space to remember who you were before he tried to destroy you. They stood there as the sun tracked across the sky, two people who'd found each other in darkness and chose to build something in the light. It wouldn't always be easy. Lena knew that. There would be more panic attacks, more nightmares, more moments when the past reached out to drag her back. But she also knew she wouldn't face them alone. That night, Lena burned the letter in the fireplace, watching Marcus's words turn to ash and smoke. Adrian stood beside her, silent support, letting her process this final goodbye in her own way. When the last ember died, Lena turned to him and smiled. A real smile, full and genuine and free. Ready for whatever comes next? She asked. Adrian took her hand, laced their fingers together in a gesture that had become as natural as breathing. With you? He said. Always. And standing there in the firelight, watching the past turn to ash, Lena Carter finally believed she was going to be okay. More than okay. She was going to thrive. The ashes from Marcus's letter were still warm in the fireplace when Adrian's phone rang. He glanced at the screen, frowned, and stepped away to answer. Lena watched the tension settle into his shoulders, heard the shift in his voice from soft to business sharp, and knew whatever calm they'd found was about to be tested. He ended the call and turned back to her, expression carefully neutral in that way that meant he was hiding something complicated. What is it? Lena asked. Thomas Carver. Adrian said the name like it tasted bitter. He wants a meeting, tomorrow night. Who's Thomas Carver? Someone I haven't spoken to in 3 years. Someone who... Adrian stopped, jaw tight. Someone who has a problem only I can solve, apparently, and he's willing to pay well for the privilege. There was more to it than that. Lena could see it in the tension around his eyes, in the way his hands had curled into fists at his sides. She crossed to him, placed her palm flat against his chest, felt his heart beating too fast. Tell me, she said quietly. Adrian covered her hand with his, pressed it more firmly against him. Thomas was my father's closest associate. They built the business together. When my father died, Thomas expected to take over, expected me to step aside because I was too young, too soft, not ruthless enough. His voice went hard. I proved him wrong, in ways that made it very clear he wasn't welcome in my organization anymore. We haven't spoken since. And now he wants your help? Now his daughter's in trouble. The kind of trouble that requires my particular skill set to fix. Adrian's expression was unreadable, and he's desperate enough to swallow his pride and ask. Lena thought about this, about the layers of history and resentment and old wounds being reopened. What are you going to do? I don't know yet. Adrian pulled her closer, rested his chin on top of her head. Part of me wants to tell him to go to hell, but his daughter, Sophia, she's 19. Got mixed up with some people who promised her a modeling career and delivered trafficking instead. She managed to escape, but they're hunting her, and Thomas doesn't have the resources to protect her anymore. But you do. Yeah, I do. He was quiet for a moment. The question is whether I use them. Lena pulled back enough to meet his eyes. You already know the answer. You're just trying to convince yourself you have a choice. Adrian almost smiled. Am I that transparent? To me? Yeah. Lena reached up, touched his face. You're going to help her, because that's who you are. You catch people when they fall, even when they're the daughters of men who wanted you to fail. She's innocent in all this. Whatever Thomas and I have between us, that's not her fault. Adrian turned his head, kissed Lena's palm. But taking this meeting means walking back into old territory, old conflicts, Things I've spent 3 years trying to move past. Then I'll go with you. Adrian's eyes went sharp. Lena, you said it yourself. This is who you are. This is what you do. She kept her voice steady. And if we're partners, really partners, then I need to understand all of it, not just the parts you think I can handle. This isn't some business dinner or gallery opening. This is... Adrian stopped, searching for words. This is the ugly part. The part where violence is on the table and mercy is a negotiation. I've kept you separate from this for a reason. I know, and I appreciate it, but I can't spend the rest of my life in a bubble where I only see the good parts of who you are. Lena stepped closer, held his gaze. Let me in. All the way in. Trust me to handle it. For a long moment, Adrian just looked at her. Then something in his expression shifted. Resignation mixed with respect, mixed with something that looked like love. Okay, he said quietly. You can come. But if things get dangerous, if the situation escalates, you do exactly what Marco tells you. No arguments. No arguments, Lena agreed. The meeting was set for 9 p.m. the following night at Luz Dorada, the same restaurant where Lena had crashed through the doors 2 months ago. The symmetry wasn't lost on her as they walked through the entrance, Adrian's hand at the small of her back, Marco and 2 other men flanking them. The restaurant had been closed for the night, cleared of regular patrons. Only one table was occupied. A man in his 60s with silver hair and hard eyes sat alone, a younger woman beside him who looked terrified and trying to hide it. Thomas Carver stood when they approached, and Lena saw the resemblance to Adrian's father in the photos. The same imposing presence, the same air of controlled violence. But where Adrian's father had looked cruel, Thomas just looked tired. Adrian? His voice was gruff. Thank you for coming. Thomas. Adrian's tone was neutral. This is Lena Carter, my partner. Thomas's gaze flicked to Lena, assessment in his eyes. The woman from the street. I heard about that. He gestured to the young woman beside him. This is my daughter, Sophia. Sophia looked up with red-rimmed eyes, and Lena's chest tightened. She couldn't have been more than 19, baby-faced and scared, with bruises on her wrist that suggested restraints, the kind of fear in her expression that Lena recognized all too well. They sat. Adrian kept his hand on Lena's knee under the table, an anchor and a warning both. Tell me what happened, Adrian said, and it wasn't a request. Thomas looked at his daughter, some silent communication passing between them. Then Sophia spoke, voice shaking. I got recruited at a mall 6 months ago. Woman said she was a modeling scout, that I had the perfect look for their agency. I was stupid enough to believe her. She laughed, a broken sound. They took photos. Professional ones at first. Then they started asking for more. Different kinds of photos, and when I said no, her voice broke. Thomas's hand clenched on the table. They threatened my family, Sophia continued after a moment. Said if I didn't cooperate, they'd hurt my father. So I did what they asked, for months, until I couldn't anymore. She looked directly at Lena, recognition in her eyes. You understand, don't you? What it's like to feel trapped. Lena's throat went tight. Yeah, I understand. I ran 3 days ago, stole a phone and called my dad, but they found where I was hiding twice already. They have resources, connections, and they're not going to stop until they get me back or... Sophia's voice failed her. Or make an example of you, Adrian finished quietly. Who's running the operation? Man named Viktor Kozlov, Russian, has legitimate businesses as fronts, but the real money comes from what he did to me and girls like me. Sophia's hands were shaking. My dad tried to handle it, called in favors, but Viktor has protection. People in the police and City Hall, everyone's afraid of him. Adrian was very still, that dangerous calm settling over him that Lena had learned meant he was thinking through angles and calculating costs. Viktor Kozlov, I know of him. He's been trying to expand into territory I control. I've been pushing back. Which is why I came to you, Thomas said. You have the power to make this stop, to make Sophia safe, and I'm... He stopped, jaw working. I'm asking for your help, despite everything between us. I'm asking. The words clearly cost him. Lena could see it in the tension of his shoulders, in the way he couldn't quite meet Adrian's eyes. This was a man who'd expected to rule and instead had to beg from the boy he'd underestimated. Adrian leaned back in his chair, expression unreadable. "And what are you offering in return?" "Anything. Everything I have left. My loyalty. My connections. My businesses. What's left of them?" Thomas's voice went rough. "Please. She's my daughter. She's all I have." The silence stretched. Lena felt Adrian's hand tighten on her knee, felt the weight of the decision he was making. This wasn't just about Sophia. It was about old wounds and pride, and whether mercy was weakness or strength. "I'll handle it," Adrian finally said. "But not for you, Thomas, for her, because she's 19 and scared and deserves better than what Kozlov gave her." Relief flooded Thomas's face. Thank you. I'm not finished." Adrian's voice went hard. "I'll protect Sophia. I'll eliminate the Kozlov threat. But your debt to me isn't paid with money or loyalty or businesses. It's paid with the truth. You wanted my father's empire. You tried to take it from me when I was 17. You called me weak, called me soft, said I'd destroy everything he'd built. I want to hear you admit you were wrong." The demand hung in the air, sharp and unforgiving. Thomas's face went red, then white. Lena could see the war happening behind his eyes. Pride against desperation, ego against love for his daughter. "I was wrong," Thomas finally said, voice barely above a whisper. "You're stronger than your father ever was. You built something he never could have. And I was bitter and afraid. And I took it out on you when you didn't deserve it. I'm sorry." Adrian nodded once. Apology accepted. "Now take Sophia to the car outside. Marco will drive you both to a safe house I own upstate. You'll stay there until this is resolved. Don't leave. Don't contact anyone, understood?" "Understood." Thomas stood, helped Sophia up. He paused, looked at Adrian with something that might have been respect. "For what it's worth, your mother would be proud of the man you became." Adrian's expression flickered, just for a second. Then it was gone, replaced by that careful control. "Get her safe. That's all that matters now." They left. Marco ushered them out with quiet efficiency, leaving Lena and Adrian alone at the table. The restaurant felt cavernous in the silence, full of ghosts and memories. "You okay?" Lena asked quietly. "I will be." Adrian scrubbed a hand over his face. "Once I deal with Kozlov." "How are you going to do that?" Adrian's expression went dark. "However necessary. This isn't like Marcus. Kozlov won't scare easily, won't respond to financial pressure or legal maneuvering. This requires—" He stopped, looked at her. "This is the part I didn't want you to see. The part where violence isn't a last resort. It's the only option." Lena thought about Sophia's terrified face, about the bruises on her wrists, about the months of horror she'd endured. Thought about how many other girls were still trapped in Kozlov's operation. How many more would be if someone didn't stop him? "Then do what you have to do," she said. "But come back to me when it's done." Adrian pulled her close, kissed her hard. "Always." The next 2 days were the longest of Lena's life. Adrian disappeared into his office making calls in languages she didn't speak, coordinating with people whose names she didn't know. Marco came and went. Rosa clucked around the penthouse trying to keep things normal while clearly worried. And Lena waited, trying not to imagine all the ways this could go wrong. Dr. Chen noticed the tension during their session. "Something's happening," she observed. "You want to talk about it?" Lena stared at her hands. "Adrian's handling something dangerous. And I know what he does. I've accepted it, but this is different. This is active threat, active violence, and I'm just waiting." "How does that feel?" "Terrifying, but also—" Lena searched for the right words. "Also right? He's protecting someone who can't protect themselves. He's using his power for something good, even if the methods aren't. And I think that's who he is at his core. Not the violence, the protection." Dr. Chen nodded slowly. "You've come a long way from the woman who couldn't make eye contact 2 months ago." "I had good teachers," Lena managed to smile. "You, Claire, Adrian, even Marcus in his own twisted way. He taught me what I won't tolerate ever again." "And what will you tolerate?" Lena thought about Adrian's hands on her face, about the way he asked permission before touching her, about how he'd dismantled Marcus's life to keep her safe, about how he'd taken in a broken stranger and given her space to heal. Complexity, she said, imperfection, darkness that chooses mercy. I'll tolerate being protected without being controlled, being loved without being possessed, being partnered with instead of ruled over. She looked up at Dr. Chen. Is that healthy? I think, Dr. Chen said carefully, that healthy looks different for everyone. And what matters is whether you're growing or shrinking in this relationship, whether you're becoming more yourself or less. More, Lena said without hesitation. Definitely more. Then trust that. And trust yourself to know if it changes. Adrian came home on the third night looking exhausted but satisfied. He found Lena on the balcony watching the city lights and pulled her into his arms without a word. It's done, he said against her hair. Kozlov's operation is shut down. He's been convinced to leave the country permanently. The girls he had are being transferred to a shelter I fund. Sophia's safe. Thomas is safe. It's over. Lena turned in his arms, searched his face for signs of injury, of trauma, of whatever he'd had to do to make this happen. Found only that same careful control and bone-deep weariness. Are you okay? She asked. I will be. Adrian's arms tightened around her. I just need this. You. Something good to balance out the necessary evil. They stood there as the night deepened, holding each other, two people who'd found light in each other's darkness. Eventually they went inside. Adrian showered, washing away whatever had happened in those 3 days. Lena made tea and waited. When he emerged, wearing sweatpants and nothing else, he looked younger, more vulnerable. He found her in the living room and pulled her onto the couch, arranged her so she was tucked against his side. Thank you, he said quietly. For what? For not asking for details. For trusting me to do what needed doing. For waiting. He kissed the top of her head. For being here when I came back. Where else would I be? Anywhere. Somewhere safer. Somewhere that doesn't involve crime bosses and trafficking rings and violence. Adrian's voice was rough. You could have a normal life, Lena. You should have a normal life. I tried normal. Lena laced her fingers through his. Normal was Marcus. Normal was getting beaten down until I forgot who I was. Normal was being afraid to exist. So forgive me if I'm not interested in normal anymore. What are you interested in? She turned to look at him, saw the vulnerability in his dark eyes, the fear that she'd wake up one day and realize what she'd signed up for. Saw the man who'd caught her when she fell and kept catching her every time she stumbled. This, she said simply, you, us, whatever complicated, messy, imperfect thing we're building. I'm interested in that. Adrian cupped her face in his hands, thumbs tracing her cheekbones with devastating gentleness. I love you, he said, and the words landed like a confession. I know it's too soon. I know you might not be ready to hear it. But I need you to know. I love you, Lena Carter, more than I've ever loved anything. Lena's eyes burned with tears she didn't try to hide. I love you too. Even though it's crazy, even though we barely know each other, even though you're dangerous and complicated and everything I should run from, I love you anyway. He kissed her then, soft and thorough and full of promise. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Adrian rested his forehead against hers. Move in with me, he said, officially. Not just staying here while you figure things out. Actually move in. Make this place ours instead of mine. I already live here, Lena pointed out, smiling. But your stuff's still in storage. You still talk about this as Adrian's apartment instead of home. He stopped, searching for words. I want you to claim space here. Paint the guest room whatever color you want. Fill the closets with your clothes. Leave your books all over my office. Make this place feel lived in instead of like a museum. Lena thought about it, about the difference between staying and belonging, about what it meant to stop treating this as temporary and start treating it as permanent. Okay, she said. Yeah, let's do it. The smile that spread across Adrian's face was blinding. He pulled her close again, and they spent the rest of the night making plans, where her books would go, what color to paint the guest room that would become her office, how to merge their lives into something cohesive. It felt like building, like creating something new from the ruins of who they'd been before. The weeks that followed were a blur of integration. Lena's things came out of storage, books and clothes, and the few possessions she'd salvaged from her old life. She claimed the guest room as her own space, painting it a soft gray blue that reminded her of early morning. Set up a desk where she could write, something Dr. Chen had suggested as a form of processing. Claire helped, showing up with wine and opinions about furniture placement. She and Adrian had reached a tentative truce, united by their shared investment in Lena's well-being, if nothing else. "He's growing on me," Claire admitted one afternoon while they assembled a bookshelf. "Still think you're crazy, but he makes you happy, and that counts for something." "He does make me happy," Lena agreed, "in ways I didn't know I could be happy." "Have you thought about what comes next? Long term?" Lena tightened a screw, considering. "Not really. I'm trying to stay present, enjoy what we have now instead of worrying about the future." "Very zen of you." Claire handed her another piece of the shelf. "But seriously, you're rebuilding your whole life. You could do anything, be anything. Have you thought about what you want?" What did she want? Lena turned the question over in her mind. 6 months ago, she'd wanted safety. 3 months ago, she'd wanted to not be afraid. Now she wanted something bigger. "I want to help people," she said slowly. "People like Sophia, like me. People who get trapped and can't see a way out. I want to, I don't know, create something, a foundation maybe, or a shelter, something that gives people options when they think they don't have any." Claire's eyes went soft. "That's beautiful. Have you told Adrian?" "Not yet. It's still just an idea." "Tell him. I bet he'd help. He's good at making things happen." That night, over dinner, Lena brought it up. Adrian listened as she explained the half-formed idea, the vision of something that could help people the way she'd been helped. "I want to call it the Elena Project," she finished. "After your mother, if that's okay with you." Adrian set down his fork, expression unreadable. For a long moment he just looked at her, and Lena, worried she'd overstepped, assumed too much. Then he smiled, a real smile that transformed his whole face. "She would have loved that," he said, voice rough with emotion. "She would have loved you." "So you'll help?" "I'll do more than help. I'll fund it. I'll provide security. I'll use every connection I have to make sure women in danger know they have somewhere safe to go." Adrian reached across the table, took her hand. "We'll build it together. Something good coming from all the darkness we've both survived." Lena felt tears prick her eyes. "Thank you. Thank you for giving her memory purpose, for taking pain and turning it into something that helps others." He squeezed her hand. "You're remarkable. You know that? I'm just trying to make sense of what happened to me. You're doing more than that. You're transforming it, refusing to let it define you as a victim and instead using it to become," Adrian paused, searching for the right word, "a warrior, someone who fights for others." The Elena Project became real faster than Lena had imagined possible. Adrian connected her with lawyers who handled the paperwork, with real estate agents who found a building in Brooklyn that could be converted into a shelter, with security experts who made sure the location stayed secret from abusers looking for their victims. Lena threw herself into it with an intensity that surprised her. This was purpose. This was meaning. This was taking the worst thing that had ever happened to her and making sure it led to something good. She hired staff, social workers and therapists and advocates who understood trauma. She set up protocols for intake, for safety, for helping women rebuild their lives. She partnered with Claire's gallery to provide art therapy. She worked with Dr. Chen to develop mental health programs. And through it all, Adrian supported her. Not controlling or managing, just there, offering resources when she needed them, stepping back when she didn't, celebrating small victories and helping her process setbacks. 6 months after the night she'd crashed through restaurant doors, the Elena Project opened its doors to its first residents. 3 women, all escaping domestic violence, all terrified and broken and trying to find their way back to themselves. Lena met them in the common room, saw her own story reflected in their faces, and felt something slot into place. This was why she'd survived. This was the purpose her pain had built toward. "You're safe here," she told them, and meant it with every fiber of her being. "Whatever you've survived, whatever brought you here, You're safe now, and we're going to help you figure out what comes next, together. One of the women, barely 20, with bruises on her neck, started crying. How do you know? How can you promise that? Lena sat down beside her, took her hand gently. Because I've been where you are. I know what it's like to think you'll never be safe again, to think you're broken beyond repair. But you're not. You're bent. And bent things can straighten out with time and help, and people who give a damn. She smiled. I'm proof of that. And you will be too. That night, Lena came home to find Adrian waiting on the balcony with champagne and that soft expression he got when he looked at her. To the Elena Project, he said, handing her a glass, and to the woman who made it real. They toasted as the city sparkled below them. Lena leaned against the railing, felt Adrian's arm come around her waist, felt the solid certainty of him beside her. Thank you, she said quietly, for everything, for catching me, for giving me space to heal, for supporting this dream, for loving me when I couldn't love myself. Thank you for letting me. Adrian turned her to face him. You saved me too, you know. I was turning into my father, cold, isolated, using control to fill the empty spaces. But you reminded me that strength doesn't have to mean hardness, that protection doesn't have to mean possession, that love is possible even in darkness. Lena reached up, touched his face, traced the sharp line of his jaw. We saved each other. Yeah. Adrian smiled, soft and genuine. We did. He kissed her as the city lights blurred below them, as the night wrapped around them like a promise. When they finally broke apart, both breathless, Adrian pulled something from his pocket. A key. What's this? Lena asked. Key to the house upstate. The one where you healed. Where we... He stopped, seemed to be choosing his words carefully. I want you to have it, so you always have somewhere to go if the city gets too loud. If you need space. If you just want quiet. Lena closed her fingers around the key, felt the weight of what he was offering. Trust. Space. Freedom within their relationship instead of despite it. I love you, she whispered. I love you too. Adrian pulled her close again. Always. They stood there as the city breathed around them, two people who'd found each other in the wreckage and built something beautiful from the ruins. It wasn't perfect, would never be perfect. There would be hard days and setbacks and moments when the past reached out to drag them backward. But they'd face it together. A year later, Lena stood in the living room of the upstate house, watching through the windows as Adrian chopped wood in the backyard. The Elena Project was thriving. 20 women housed, dozens more on the waiting list, partnerships with other shelters forming across the state. She'd testified before the city council about domestic violence resources, had been interviewed for a documentary about survivors who became advocates, had built a life that felt real and purposeful and wholly hers. Dr. Chen had reduced their sessions to once a month. Maintenance, she called it, making sure Lena stayed healthy, stayed growing, stayed true to herself. The nightmares were less frequent now, the panic attacks rare. Lena could walk down the street without checking over her shoulder, could handle raised voices without flinching, could exist in her own skin without the constant fear that had defined her for so long. She'd even seen Marcus once, by accident, at a coffee shop during a work trip to Vegas. He'd looked smaller than she remembered, diminished in ways that had nothing to do with physical size. Their eyes had met across the shop, and Lena had felt nothing. No fear, no anger. Just the distant recognition of someone who'd been part of her story but wasn't part of her present. He'd nodded once, a small acknowledgement, and left without approaching her. And Lena had ordered her coffee and gone on with her day, unshaken, whole. Adrian came inside now, saw her lost in thought and crossed to pull her into his arms. He smelled like pine and fresh air and home. What are you thinking about? He asked. How far we've come. How different everything is from that night I crashed through the restaurant doors. Lena turned in his arms, looked up at him. I was so broken then, so sure I'd never be whole again. And then now? Now I know I was never actually broken, just bent. She smiled. You taught me that. You taught yourself. I just held the pieces while you figured out how to put them back together. Lena kissed him, soft and slow and full of gratitude for this man who'd caught her when she fell and loved her through the healing. When they broke apart, she rested her forehead against his. "I never thanked you," she said quietly, "for seeing me that night, for not walking past, for making my safety matter more than your convenience. You don't need to thank me for that. You were falling. I caught you. It's what we do for each other." "Is that what we do?" "Yeah." Adrian's arms tightened around her. "That's exactly what we do." They spent the weekend at the upstate house, hiking through woods that had seen them at their most vulnerable, cooking meals together, existing in the comfortable silence of two people who'd learned each other's rhythms. On Sunday evening, as they packed to head back to the city, Adrian pulled Lena onto the porch where they'd first acknowledged what was growing between them. "I have something for you," he said, and there was nervousness in his voice that she'd never heard before. "What is it?" Adrian pulled a small box from his pocket, opened it to reveal a ring, simple, elegant, a single stone that caught the fading sunlight and split it into rainbows. Lena's breath caught. "I know we said we'd take things slow," Adrian started, words tumbling out faster than his usual controlled pace. "I know you're still healing, still building, still figuring out who you are outside of survival. But Lena, I know who I am with you. I'm better, gentler, more human. And I want to spend the rest of my life catching you when you fall and letting you catch me when I forget how to be anything other than what my father made me." He took a breath, steadied himself. "I'm not asking you to marry me tomorrow, or next month, or even next year. I'm just asking if, someday, you'd be willing to make this official. To build a life together that's ours. Not mine or yours, but genuinely shared. To be partners in everything, not just survival, but joy and purpose and whatever comes next." Lena stared at the ring, at this man who'd seen her at her worst and loved her anyway, at the life they'd built from violence and fear and unexpected grace. She thought about the girl she'd been a year ago, broken and terrified and sure she'd never be safe again. Thought about the woman she was now, strong and purposeful and loved in ways that made her feel whole. "Yes," she said, and watched Adrian's face transform with joy. "Someday, when we're both ready, when it's the right time. Yes." Adrian slipped the ring on her finger, kissed her hard, and Lena kissed him back with all the love and gratitude and hope she'd learned to feel again. When they finally broke apart, both laughing and crying, she held up her hand and watched the stone catch the light. "I love you," she said. "My dangerous, complicated, beautiful man who saved me by letting me save myself." "I love you too," Adrian replied. "My brave, fierce, remarkable woman who reminded me what it means to be human." They stood there as the sun set over the woods, wrapped in each other and the future they were building together. It wouldn't be perfect, would never be simple, but it would be theirs, built on honesty and choice and the kind of love that grew from darkness into light. Lena Carter, who'd once crashed through restaurant doors barefoot and bleeding, looked at the man beside her and the ring on her finger and the life spread out before them, and felt something she hadn't felt in longer than she could remember. Hope. Not the desperate hope of survival, but the deep, certain hope of someone who'd learned that broken things could heal, that bent could straighten, that falling could lead to being caught by exactly the right person at exactly the right time. She'd survived Marcus. She'd survived the worst thing she could imagine. And now she was going to do more than survive. She was going to thrive. With Adrian beside her, with the Elena project giving purpose to her pain, with a future built on choice instead of fear, Lena Carter was finally, completely, beautifully free. And standing there on the porch where their story had really begun, watching the last light fade from the sky, she knew with absolute certainty that this was exactly where she was meant to be. Not running, not hiding, not afraid, just home.